Volume 2, Prologue Audience with the King. To the east of Zetalun continent lies a nation situated at the perilous foot of Mount Auburn, the Kingdom of Fremavara. This world had a unique form of natural power, magic. And there were beasts who uses magic, demon beasts. The nation acts as a barrier against the Bokyu Sea of trees, where many demon beasts lurked. The people called it the Nation of Knights. The year is 1277, winter was over and it was the time for the bountiful spring that brings life. It was during this time when the incident happened. Division-level demon beast Behemoth attacked. The demon beast crossing the defense line in the eastern borders of the Fremavara kingdom was known as the Behemoth incident. That demon beast was en route to disrupting the major transport artery of the nation, pushing the kingdom of Fremavara to the edge of downfall. During this crisis, the ones rise to the occasion were the Jantunan garrison knights and the trainees from LightNovel Pilot Academy. Without regarding their own safety, they fought the behemoth courageously. At the expense of many sacrifices, they defeated their adversary and brought peace to the nation. The majestic Auburn mountain range was right behind the capital of the Fremavara kingdom, Kankanen. At the center of the capital was the castle Schreiber, which was surrounded by a lively atmosphere. Bards singing about legendary tales were everywhere, entertaining the people in the taverns who were drinking wine in broad daylight. The merchants used this opportunity to set up shops, advertising their wares loudly. Everyone were enjoying themselves and laughing cheerfully. This chaotic scene was because of the awards ceremony held in the castle for the Jantunan Knights and the high school student pilots of LightNovel Pilot Academy. Those who heard the events of the battle trembled in fear and vigorously praised the knights who fended off the demon beast. They also took the opportunity to enjoy this grand event. An elderly man and a young child walked on the crowded streets of the capital. They were the dean of LightNovel Pilot Academy, Laurie Echevarria, and his grandson Ernesty Echevarria. The streets were overflowing with pedestrians. The petite ERU grabbed onto Laurie's clothes so they won't be separated. In his other hand was a thin slice of baked fruit pie. "Grandpa, do you want some?" I'm fine, eat all of it, ERU. ERU nodded and he took large bites as he moved nimbly among the crowd. This was brought from a stall that could be found anywhere along the road. "There are so many people. Grandpa is taking me out for a trip, and it turned out like this." The young and old pair was in the bustling capital because of the king's invitation. After ERU asked, he found out that Laurie and the king were classmates. Because of their relationship, Laurie held the post of a royal consultant in the past. Laurie eventually became a dean, and their friendship continued till this day. The king knew Laurie was related to Ernesty Echevarria, the person who piloted the Red Silhouette Knight skillfully during the Behemoth incident, so he invited both of them for an audience. ERU, who heard about this, couldn't shake off the ominous feeling he had during the journey here. The king had asked specifically for him, he wouldn't let him off easily with just a few questions. With his sigh smelling like sweet fruits, the two of them moved towards the royal castle against the flow of the crowd. The main gate of the Schreiber castle was bustling with people while the back gate was relatively quiet. Making their way through the crowd, the duo finally reached their destination and was received by the guards. They were led to a conference room-like place in the castle and were left alone after being asked to wait momentarily. The grandfather and grandson were alone in the vast room. The cheers of the crowd at the award ceremony could be heard from the distance. "ERU, are you nervous?" "Of course. I never thought I would have the chance to meet His Majesty." "I thought ERU won't be bothered by such small matters." "The way you put it sounds mean, Grandpa." Chatting idly when they were about to meet the king, the two of them were rather audacious. Shortly after, the guards appeared again and announced the arrival of the person they were waiting for. They turned and stood. The door opened and several people walked in. Leading the way was the king everyone in Fremavara knew, Ambrosius Tavo Fremavara. He was past his prime, but his ageless majesty could be felt clearly. Two men with the air of nobility followed behind him. When Ambrosius entered the room and met Laurie's eyes, his mouth turned into a smile in an instant. "Thank you for coming, I have kept you waiting. It's been ages, Laurie." "Long time no see, Your Majesty. I should be the one thanking you for meeting us despite your busy schedule." "Don't mention it, this meeting was arranged out of my curiosity after all." "Well, he is the pilot of that Crimson Silhouette Knight. Right?" Ambrose and the nobles behind him shifted their gaze to Laurie's side. The report stated a child 12 years of age piloted a Silu at night and fought the behemoth, so they thought it would be a youth that looked older than he actually was. But in actual fact before them was a child that was smaller than a normal 12-year-old, a boy that could be mistaken for a girl. He had a gentle appearance, a round face with determined bright eyes blinking. His silvery purple hair reached his jaws, covering the side of his face. This made the bunch, who had experienced great political trials, stiffen. But the king was no ordinary man. After raising an eyebrow in surprise, he changed his expression to one of curiosity in no time. "Oh, I thought it was a boy from the reports, I didn't realize the pilot was a girl." "No, Your Majesty. I might look like this, but I am a boy. Pardon my late introduction. Nice to meet you. I am the grandson of Laurie Echevarria, Ernest T. I am very pleased to meet with Your Majesty today." "Oh, I heard you were a 12-year-old child, but aren't you outspoken? It's hard to converse if you are too formal, please relax." "All right, as you command." Seeing you accepting so readily, the two men behind Ambrosius changed their expression from shock to dumbfound. They were unable to judge if you was a great person or just someone who didn't know manners. "I will get to the point. I invited you here to conclude the aftermath of the behemoth incident. I heard that your performance was excellent, but could not be commended publicly." Ambrosius said as he looked at ERU. "I heard you are agreeable with that. But I felt that it isn't right to simply dismiss a capable knight who could fight the behemoth on equal grounds, so I want to give you a fair reward in private." "That might be so, but it is hard to give an appropriate reward for an underage child." Ambrosius explained with a warm smile, but no matter how you looked at it, it was a smile with malicious intentions. "To bring up this issue that had already been rejected, is he testing me?" ERU behaved as usual, but the wariness in his heart increased slowly. "Be it promoting you to a full-fledged knight or granting you nobility titles, your age is a limiting factor. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand that it is too much for an underage child of 12 years of age." How perceptive of you. And so, what do you want?" "I think it would be easier to ask the person in question directly. If it is something that matches your accomplishment, I will grant it to you as a reward." Ambrosius' direct explanation surprised ERU. Accepting this proposal, Aru's brain started churning at a high speed. It's hard to imagine, but is this out of his goodwill? Or, does he want to see if I am easily baited by rewards? Wanting to give me a reward now is suspicious. A pie that fell out of the sky into his hands. But there were no free lunches in this world. This was common knowledge, be it in this world or the previous one. That might be so, but I can't turn down the offer from the king, I have to say something. Finding a reward that befits the contribution of defeating the behemoth. How much is this worth in terms of money? How much is it in terms of material? Is there anything he wants aside from titles? ERU simply didn't know how much this is worth. Should he use his age as an excuse and make an unreasonable request? When he pondered about that, he dismissed the thought. Wrong, I don't think that is an expression he would show a child. In Aru's memory, he found Ambrosius' expression familiar. Rousing through the fading memories of his previous life, the warm expression was looking for the smallest loophole in the conversation, the expression of a salesman. Something must be up. How about asking for a Silu at night? It would be great to have a reference model. It might work from the contributions I made. Fukeki. As ERU was about to give in to his desires and give his reply, a strong thought flashed through his mind. No, this is a great chance. There is no way to tell if I will ever have a chance to ask the king for something. Then I should ask for something only the king could give. Right, that should be the thing that is the hardest to obtain. It was just a short moment, before ERU finished his thoughts. It's fine if it doesn't work, he could think of something else. Then he thought optimistically as he casually said. Well, Your Majesty, the thing I crave for the most right now is knowledge on how to make an ether reactor. The air froze in silence. Hearing this whimsical wish made Ambrosius surprised. That was expected, this was too weird as a wish for a 12-year-old child. Not just him, even the usually calm Laurie was tensing up, the other two were stunned and seemed baffled. They were treating ERU like a child. If the request was unexpected, they won't lose their composure. But what ERU wanted was impossible for a person. This answer was too unexpected, even the wise Ambrosius couldn't react immediately, creating a strange silence. The first to react was a noble behind him, Duke Canute Dixgard. Do you know what you are saying? Silence. Canute, who almost lost his composure because of the confusion, was interrupted by Ambrosius, who regained his senses. The relaxed atmosphere from earlier had changed. Facing the king, who was displaying his dignity as the head of state, everyone present stood at attention. Ernest D., you mentioned the production method of the ether reactor. That is surprising. Asking me is the only way of getting your hands on it, but normal people won't want such a thing. And so I have to ask, what do you plan to do with this knowledge? The king squinted his eyes, silently pressuring ERU. Cold sweat was falling from Aru's back, but he looked back with a steel resolve. Right or wrong aside, state your reason. Why do you want such a thing? Yes, I am currently studying in LightNovel with being a pilot as a goal, but I really wanted to have my own silhouette night. Oh, a personal silhouette night. What a grand aspiration. That is understandable, why not ask for it now? It just might come true. Listening to Ambrosius' words, ERU shook his head. In the past, I just wanted my own silhouette night, but it's different now. I wish to use my own hands to create the best silhouette night that belongs to just me. Another answer that went beyond his imagination made the king dumbstruck. At this moment, something he read in the report came to mind. Changing the Magus engine's script by himself, ha! Is this boy serious? He is not kidding, and really hopes to do that. He had that capability. Facing the silent Ambrosius, ERU continued to explain. This is the reason why I seek knowledge from all fields in LightNovel Pilot Academy. Getting magical knowledge, learning the construction and piloting methods of the silhouette knights. I had already investigated the technique of constructing the machine frame, but I am still missing a crucial part. That's right, the ether reactor. As your Majesty already knows, the method is not available to normal citizens. Hence, when you mention a reward, I hope you could teach me the production method. If I know how, the next thing would be constructing it. Laurie looked at his grandson, explained to the king worriedly. He knew ERU was passionate about silhouette nights, but he didn't think ERU would put caution to the wind and request for it at such a juncture. The situation had already progressed to this stage, it would be hard to help ERU. Laurie glanced at the king and saw that Ambrosius made a serious expression and said heavily. Quote. And so, your reason is? Because it's my hobby. Everyone present acted as if they saw something strange and had a complicated expression. In this silence, a faint suppressed laughter was suddenly heard, making everyone look over in shock. Ambrosius' shoulders were trembling silently, and he suddenly burst out in laughter. How, ha! Ridiculous. To say it's a hobby. Ha ha ha. This is interesting. To seek the classified secret of a nation because of a hobby. Are you really a 12-year-old kid? Hey ha ha. Magnificent. I have not met such an interesting person like you for a long time. The two nobles watched the king laugh uncontrollably in shocked silence. Laurie, who knew the king the longest, could tell he was amused for real and relaxed. Fine, I will grant your wish. Wah, your Majesty, you mustn't. That's not something you can teach an unknown child. I know where he came from, he is the grandson of my friend. That might be so, but it's only natural for you to worry, right? Ernest D. After ERU finished his explanation, he watched the situation unfold silently. When he heard Ambrosius say that, ERU tensed his face. I will grant your request. But this is a classified secret. The mere accomplishment of taking down the behemoth isn't enough. Aru's expression turned to doubt. The king accepted the proposal, but commented the accomplishment wasn't enough. This made ERU doubt the king's intention. Ambrosius saw the doubt flash across Aru's face and revealed a joyous smile. Don't worry, a king wouldn't lie. I guarantee you that when you have met the adequate amount of accomplishments, I will pass the knowledge on to you. This could be interpreted as using a reward as bait, and asking me to work for free, but it is still an unexpected gain. Forget the terms for now, this is a chance to learn a critical secret. This reward was worth more than 10,000 in cash to ERU. The cute smiling expression was burning with desire and passion. Ambrosius was certain his plan was right after seeing Aru's face. Heke, putting it this way seems a bit empty. I will determine the means. You said you wanted to create silhouette knights. Well then, show me your worth. Prove that you can use the knowledge of creating ether reactors. Prove, please tell me what should I do. Just create a silhouette knight would be enough. Apart from the reactor, make the casing of the best silhouette knight in your opinion for me to see. If I am satisfied, I will make this wish of yours come true. When ERU heard these words, his expression was like a predator that had found its prey. The king used the final part ERU needed as the goal. And to ERU, it was something he was going to do sooner or later. And of course, he accepted without hesitation. By your command, I will prepare a silhouette knight that would satisfy your majesty. Shortly after the audience with Ernesti ended, Ambrosius went to a private room of the king that wasn't a meeting or audience hall. There was another man in the room, Laurie. Heke, it's been a long time since I had such a fruitful day. Laurie, your grandson is really interesting. When he remembered what happened just now, Ambrosius, who was a little drunk, would smile. Sigh, I left his upbringing to my daughter completely. That child had always loved silhouette knights, but I didn't know he would bring it so far. I couldn't grasp the situation and was dripping with cold sweat. I heard a 12-year-old child fought with the behemoth, so I summoned him to take a look. But you can't say he is a child anymore. Ara, my grandson is still at school, though. Children have to be ambitious, but who would come out with such a weird request? I had heard so many requests all these years, but the request today was superb. The two of them clinked their wine glass and continued chatting in high spirits. Because it was too interesting, I accidentally made a happy promise. Because it's my grandson. I will work hard to nurture him and won't let your majesty down. Yes, that's right, I was worried about his future because he was too capable. But after meeting him, I realized that was unnecessary. Ambrosius probably thought of that time again as he let out a soft laugh from his throat. Ara, for your majesty to have such high expectations, my grandson is quite promising. Hekeki, I am not interested in him because he is your grandchild, I am curious on what surprising things he would do. Making a better silhouette knight an absurd task, but he accepted without hesitation. As he spoke, Ambrosius suddenly had a precognition that was something similar to a belief. It probably wouldn't be long before he brings the results before me. To make such a promise lightly. I have to advise His Majesty to curb his desire for amusement. One of the nobles that were present during the audience, Duke Canute Dixguards, complained to his counterpart Marquis Joaquin Cerati. Watch your words, Duke. His Majesty isn't so petty that he wouldn't accept advice. Or do you think it's fine to disclose a national secret to a suspicious child? I don't think so, that is why His Majesty added these terms. Even if he is the grandson of the LightNovel Pilot Academy's dean, it is not easy to make a new silhouette knight. I am not talking about how hard it is, I am saying there is something wrong with the promise itself. Canute was indignant, taking heavy steps as he passed through the corridor. Joachim, who was following him, saw the figures of his children in his mind. Supplements of the report of Jantunan's Knight Commander Philip Halhagen was done by his daughter, Stefania. The report included how his bastard children were close to ERU. In the end, ERU was someone he knew. It might be necessary to gather some intelligence, or issue some instructions to his illegitimate children. Besides Joachim, who was deep in thought, Nut's expression was becoming serious. Even though he is still a child, it's dangerous to leave him alone. These words weren't heard by anyone, dissipating into the air quietly. Volume 2, Chapter 10. Everyone's Beginning. LightNovel Pilot Academy was the largest educational facility in the Fremavira Kingdom. It conducts the pilot training program and naturally has maintenance facilities to support the usage of the silhouette knight on campus. Included are the inner skeleton, outer skin, parts crafting and the linking of crystal tissue, a place to assemble all the parts. All these facilities are named as a whole as the workshop. In order to service the 10-meter-tall humanoid weapon silhouette knights, the interior of the workshop was spacious. Situated at the edge was the maintenance platform shaped like a gigantic chair. A silhouette knight was placed on it, and a large group of students were doing maintenance work. The unarmored arm of the silhouette knight was placed on a truck to be transported. The sound of hammers pounding the giant armor into shape could be heard. There was noise everywhere and some of the people were even bickering. A burly man headed past the frantically working students with heavy steps. No, it was a bit wrong to use burly as the description. The man was short for his age, but he had a stout body. He was twice as thick as a normal man, giving off a strong sense of presence to the surroundings. This wasn't because of body fat, but the strong and thick muscles buffing him up. His finely plaited hair flowing down his back and his magnificent beard clearly showed that he was from the crafting race, a dwarf. He approached the squabbling students and silently hit them with his arms that were thicker than a human leg. He held back, but being whacked by a dwarf still made the two of them roll on the floor in pain. Really, everyone is finding trouble with me at such a busy time. If you have time to talk trash, then move your hands. Cough. Boss. Sorry, we will get back to work right away. If a dwarf gets serious, they could crush boulders with their bare hands. It was no joke. You don't want to get on the bad side of the boss, the leader of the Pilot Academy's crafting students. The two who were quarreling non-stop rushed back to their workstation. Stop messing around, half of our knights were destroyed. I've had enough. The Silhouette Knights that were heavily damaged in the battle with the Behemoth were sent here. It should originally start from repairs, but with most of the machines destroyed with only the core and the frame intact, the school had unanimously agreed to build new ones from scratch. With the knowledge and skill of the maintenance students, constructing new knights wasn't too difficult. But it wasn't just one or two. With so many orders, the workload dramatically increased. They had to get help from people from the craftsman department. The academy really went all out. Even though there were many knights to rebuild, priority was given to machines that had more surviving parts. Those that were heavily damaged and needed a lot of work would be worked on later. This one would be worked on at the very end. The boss stopped before one of the machines. Although all the wreckages were damaged seriously, only that one's inner skeleton fell completely apart, leaving behind only sparse parts, a terrible sight. The ether reactor and Magus engine remaining intact despite the damage was a miracle. On closer inspection, the destruction was really thorough. Was it damaged from the mana being exhausted? The inner skeleton is breaking apart. The boss was staring at the wreckage seriously for a long while. The students hearing him mumble tilted their heads, unable to comprehend why the boss was so surprised. Ah. That should be common, right? It can't be helped if the ether reactor was flattened, huh? The student who was speaking doubted his own words, staring intently at the wreckage. The ether reactor was intact, but the mana was depleted, resulting in the inner skeleton falling apart. Seeing this illogical situation, he finally understood why the boss was puzzled. A new question arose and he asked, did the silver nerves break? What an unusual way of breaking down. Oh, that's right. The way it was destroyed is unique. The boss focused on what appeared to be the legs of the wreckage. After removing the armor, the exposed crystal tissue was torn and frayed in the middle. For these experienced craftsmen, this was a familiar symptom. The tissue exceeded its limit and will tear from fatigue sooner or later. That wasn't surprising, but these fellows had all their parts replaced with new ones before they set off. Why would it suddenly tear from fatigue? How was it piloted? Weird, this fellow broke down in a weird way. The boss grunted and stiffened, his face hidden by his beard. His intuition told him that there was something wrong with the wreckage. The way it broke down was obviously different from all the scenarios they had seen before. The maintenance department didn't just do repairs. If there were any structural improvement that could be made, they would be the ones to implement it. Hence, they have to do their best to understand any underlying problems in the machine. The name of the machine is Guile. The Night Runner is that fellow die. What the hell did he do? The boss yelled out loudly, and assigned someone to bring the pilot of this wreckage to him. The capital of Fremavira Kankinen had a famous aristocrat district. Most of the nobles who have their own territory also owned a property here. The Cerati Marquis clan also has a mansion here. The twins Archid, Chid, Alta and Adeltrud AD Alta were led by their sister of a different mother, Stefania, Tifa, Cerati into this place which they hadn't seen for a long time. The aged butler led these three towards Marquis Joaquim Cerati's study room. The study had a solemn color, reflecting the personality of the owner and a steadfast atmosphere. Tifa, who could see him every other day aside, the twins saw their father for the first time in years. Their nervousness was clear for all to see. Joaquim continued to arrange his documents after they entered, only speaking a few moments later. Thank you, Tifa. It's been quite a while since I saw the both of you. It's great that both of you are healthy. Is Irma doing well? Yes, long time no see, father. Mother has never fallen sick before, she is as fit as a fiddle. It's a bit awkward for a conversation between parent and child, but it's more than a problem of etiquette. The twins were the illegitimate children of the Marquis, plus their ill relation with the legal wife meant they didn't have much of a chance to interact with the main family. They seldom talked to their father, Joaquim, so both parties weren't used to this. Father, I have brought them with me. Do you have anything for them? Tifa sensed the awkward atmosphere. They had not come out with a way to converse, so getting straight to the point would help them open up with each other. That's right, I heard from Tifa that Archid and Adeltrud have a friend named Ernesty Echevarria, right? They never imagined that they would hear this name from Wakim. Not just the twins, even Tifa had a surprised expression. How is he as a person? Tell me what you know, go on. Their father's tone was beyond debate. Chid and Adi suppressed their doubts, looked at each other and described their impression of him, childhood playmate and their teacher in magic. In terms of magic alone, he should be the top talent within the nation, and his passion towards Silhouette Night, etc. Even just listening to half of it was enough to shock you, but Wakim did not question and listened quietly. The doubts in the twins' heart grew deeper because they didn't know why their father was interested in ERU. Wakim probably read their doubts from their faces, pondered for a moment and explained. He was listed as one of the contributors in the battle with the behemoth. Although there wasn't any awards for him this time, but it was proposed that he should be rewarded for his efforts in the future. This means that Aru's contribution would be properly acknowledged. Don't be hasty, it's not something that would be decided immediately, it would depend on his performance from now on. ERU, who risked his life in the Behemoth incident, wasn't recognized or rewarded after the situation was resolved. ERU himself might be fine with it, and he did give up on it without much hassle, but the twins couldn't accept it. Those who actually watched would definitely know. That might be the reason why Chid became closer to the father he wasn't good at dealing with. Wakim was strict, but he wasn't unreasonable. But father, you said it would depend on his performance, so what should we do? Simple. Just tell me if he accomplishes anything from now on. Understand? Yes, father. The joy on Chid and Adi's face were easy to see, the tense atmosphere of the visit had also dissipated. The twins were close to ERU and were sure that he would make it big one day. If they tell their father at that time, Aru's strength would be recognized. They had always been relying on ERU, so this was some form of paying him back. Tifa had a gentle smile too. She also thought that it was wrong to overlook Aru's accomplishment, so her feeling in wanting to help was the same. Wakim didn't change his expression as he watched the cheerful children. For a whole week after the Behemoth incident, LightNovel Pilot Academy stopped their classes. As the event overlapped with the field trip, many middle schoolers were injured, there were even deaths among the pilot cadets in high school. The school thus needed time to attend to this situation. In this sudden holiday, the students who were safe and sound spent their time freely. Some visited their parents back home, some relaxed in their hostel, others used the chance to play as much as possible. As for Ernest D. The Echevarria mansion was situated near LightNovel Academy City. In one of the rooms in the mansion, ERU was concentrating before a desk, writing down something. The evening sun shined through the windows, only the sound of the tip of the pen touching the paper could be heard. That should be the rough structure of it. He had just completed a section and returned the pen back into the ink bottle. ERU stretched in satisfaction, rotated his stiff shoulders and leaned back onto the chair. The words on the notebook were tidy, detailing the design theory he had learned in class, his thoughts from observing other pilots and most importantly, the ideas he came up with while piloting, which included his memories from his previous life. This notebook could be described as book of terrifying knowledge of a different world. The last page had the freshly finished sketch of the machine based on these notes. With this, I could complete the promise I made with those two, what's left is the promise with His Majesty. He crossed his arms as he mumbled to himself, falling deep in thought once again. He was troubled over the promise he made with the king a few days ago. Constructing the best Silhouette Night, the content of the promise coincided with Aru's goal, but there hadn't been any progress. There are mountains of problems. There are tons of difficulties when making a Silhouette Night, Silhouette Night. The temptation crept into his mind when he relaxed, tunneling into a corner of his mind. It spread rapidly like an ink drop in water, taking over his mind. Shortly after, ERU couldn't resist the temptation and said it out loud. Why, Silhouette Night, I want to pilot a Silhouette Night. The worst thing was thinking about related matters. The more ERU tried to not think about it, the more rooted it became in his head. Furthermore, piloting a real Silhouette Night was actually a great stroke of luck. Closing his eyes, ERU could see that scene before him again, the metallic legs following his command, the strong pace sending strong vibrations, the friction the arm made when it swung the several meters-long sword, the inertia he felt whenever he entered the command to move forward, the fight with the powerful giant beast. All these experiences and memories assaulted ERU in the form of an illusion. I want to pilot some more, just riding for that short while wasn't enough. That might be so, but Silhouette Nights were not something that you could pilot and run around in. ERU was just a middle school student. Remembering this fact, he laid down on the table meekly. No good, I can't work like this. At such a time, I need to go out for a walk. He propped himself up, running out onto the streets once he was ready. Sometime later, ERU showed up at the Smithery, Terminen workshop which was situated in LightNovel Academy City. He came to visit one of his childhood friends, the young dwarf Batson Terminen. As the son of a smithery owner, he should be working to inherit the family business. But after having this strange friend that likes Silhouette Night a little too much, he had slowly drifted onto the path of a Silhouette Night craftsman. With this background, they had been acting like a Silhouette Night fan group. That's what happened. I will be building a better Silhouette Night and present it to His Majesty. What, present it to His Majesty? Why does it suddenly look like a request from the king? I don't know what to say to you. There should be a gradual progress in events. ERU, who strongly believed that the completion day would come, chatted cheerfully while Batson just brushed it off casually. Batson thought ERU was going on a field trip, but in the end ERU exchanged blows with the behemoth. Batson thought ERU had safely returned, but he made such a ridiculous promise with the king. Maru's actions had been unpredictable over the years. Batson sighed deeply, giving up on retorting each point. Forget it. This suits your style, too. So what are your plans? Do you have an idea about the new Silhouette Night? No. Hey. Maru's firm reply made Batson almost fall over. Batson thought ERU had a plan from his confident demeanor. If you ask me what I want to create, I do have lots of ideas. But the problem of where to build it hasn't been solved. How about constructing it at your place? Of course not. Silhouette Knights were about 10 meters tall, a giant robot made from metal, crystal and magic armaments. It requires large facilities, not something you can make in a workshop in town. Can't you accommodate this? Aren't we comrades? I don't care if you are a comrade or a friend, no means no. As the two of them were chattering happily, the door of Batson's room was suddenly opened with a strong force. Both of them were shocked as they turned to look at Batson's father. He worked long years as a craftsman and had the feature of a dwarf too. His strong body was full of solid muscles, and his fierce bearded face looked just like a demon's. He was emitting a dangerous aura, pushing them back several steps. You two, didn't I say don't be noisy? It would interfere with work. If you want to be noisy, do it outside. Without waiting for him to finish, the two of them leapt out the window. They didn't hesitate even though Batson's room was on the second floor. ERU, who jumped first, landed smoothly and used air cushion to catch Batson, who jumped next. Their movements were unusually practiced, as if they had probably done this several times before. We were chased out. What do we do, Batson? Dad is fierce, it can't be helped. How about going to the pilot faculty's workshop? ERU didn't understand why Batson made this suggestion and tilted his head. Didn't a bunch of Silhouette Knights get totaled in the recent battle? They should be repairing them now, let's ask them to let us observe. I get it, that's a great idea, let's go, then. ERU cheered himself up and ran in the direction of LightNovel Pilot Academy, with Batson chasing behind. It was past noon in LightNovel Academy City. The two of them reached the campus and were passing through the school gate when they heard someone calling for them. He found him. Caught ERU. The ones who grabbed Aru's arms were Chid and 80. Because they were both taller than ERU, whose arms were caught couldn't touch the ground. Chid, 80. What is it? This is so sudden. Nothing, how should I put it, we guessed that ERU would be here. Since we guessed right, we should catch him. Well then, where should we go next? The two of them seemed to be grabbing ERU just for the fun of it. ERU swung his legs hanging in mid-air and sighed depressedly. I was thinking that the workshop of the pilot school is conducting the repairs of the Silhouette Knights, so I wanted to observe. Is that so? Let's hurry there immediately. It's fine to go along, you two. But it's about time you put me down. And so, the four of them headed towards the workshop of the pilot school. Although they were just in their first year of middle school, they were already familiar with the layout of the campus and reached there in no time. They sneakily peeped at the insides of the workshop. The knocking sound of hammers, the rollers of cranes, the angry shouts and the roar of the Silhouette Knights engine. It was noisy inside. ERU wanted very much to get closer to watch, but the frightening focus of the craftsman made them feel bad about intruding. Hence the group slowly moved to a spot where no one was working. and they came to the side of the machines that suffered devastating damage and would be dealt with later. At the rear of the workshop was a giant chair for Silhouette night maintenance. On it were iron pieces that could only be described as wreckage being lifted by a crane. That was probably the torso of a Silhouette night. As the exterior had caved in, the inner skeleton was also warped. Leaving ERU and Batson aside, the twins couldn't comprehend what it was for a moment. Thankfully, there were scraps of red paint as clues, which led them to think about the original form of that machine. That is, could it be Guile that was piloted by ERU? CHID observed the profile of ERU who was gazing at the wreckage and mumbled a question. Correct. I remember the armor and the way it was damaged. It is completely wrecked, no wonder they are putting it off until later. Amazing, what did you do to destroy it until it looks like that? Ignoring Batson who was stunned, 80 stared at the completely totaled wreckage and seemed to be in a trance. The thing before her could tell her wordlessly just how desperate the battle with the behemoth was. Even the twins who had never piloted a Silhouette night could imagine it easily. When they heard ERU talk about the incident in the past, both CHID and 80 thought they had understood how dangerous it was. But the wreckage displayed before them was beyond their imagination and made them speechless. The giant lumps of metal were twisted horribly like clay. How large was the force that destroyed it, and how dangerous it was to face it? CHID clenched his fist until it turned white, while 80 was tearing up. One misstep and ERU could have died on that battlefield, which gave them the chills. It couldn't be helped, but the twins were terribly frustrated about not doing anything to help during such a crisis. Pretty. At this moment, Aru's soft voice spread into the ears of the gloomy twins. They floated up from the sea of regret and turned towards ERU slowly. Even a destroyed robot is so pretty. ERU sighed, his profile looked so charmed. He didn't realize the atmosphere around him was turning icy and said, "That's right, when something with a form breaks apart and leaves only wreckage behind, it is known as the elegance of silence. The air of defeat and loneliness is so pretty." The eyes of the twins met for a split second. The 130-second session of the Alters siblings conference ended with a consensus they decided wordlessly to attack ERU. Ich hurts, wife Arif youth dowing. Aru's cheeks were being pulled hard, making him protest loudly in tears. The twins continued pinching without letting up. You can't blame them, ERU. Batson watched calmly from the side by himself. Hey, where did you brats come from? Stop making a racket here. The twins pinched for a moment longer before letting go. ERU, who was finally liberated, nursed his cheeks and was about to protest when a roar came from behind him. It was loud enough to be heard over the other noises in the workshop. They turned to see a dwarf youth with a strong presence, the boss, David Hepkin. Oh, isn't that the silver boy? You really like it here, huh? But don't disturb our work. The boss knew ERU, who was hanging around the pilot school as if it was normal. And he was even here when school was out. Even the boss was stunned. ERU looked past him at the person standing behind him. That face was as pale as a ghost, under the eyes were thick eye bags. His carefully combed blonde hair was a mess. The official pilot of the Red Knight, Dietrich Kunitz. For a moment, ERU couldn't identify him with the Dietrich in his memories and rubbed his eyes. But no matter how he looked at him, the Dietrich before him was in a distracted and terrible state. His arrogance and cockiness were gone, with frustration and gloom taking its place. Dietrich, senpai. Right, what happened? ERU asked with a stiff smile that lacked confidence. Dietrich's face looked so down that even ERU was troubled. Dietrich responded with an ugly smile and said hoarsely, Ernesty. Hey Keke, a little, right, just a little. I have been having nightmares recently, the demons from the infirmary chasing me, which made me lose sleep. If I let my guard down just a little, that person acting cute with a terrifying voice, pui. As he spoke, it spurred the memories of his nightmares. Dietrich's eyes lost focus and seemed to be drifting off to the other world. The boss gave him a chop to the head, pulling him back. Dietrich blacked out for a moment and then woke up. The boss chop probably worked. Where am I? Wah. Forget it. Since Ernesty is summoned here to explain, too, right. That makes it easier. What does the boy need to explain? What else? You want to know the reason why Guile broke down, right? Isn't that why you asked the reason to come here? The boss looked between Dietrich and Aru's face for a long while, slowly getting what his words meant. His frown became even deeper. Wait, from what I am hearing, that boy seems to be the reason why Guile broke down. Hey, isn't that you asked him to come without knowing that? No, I didn't look for him, he just showed up by himself. The conversation didn't match and all three of them tilted their heads simultaneously. In the space of these few seconds, Dietrich seemed to have noticed something and clapped his hands together. Ah, did I let something slip? I think that's what happened. The boss stroked his beard out of habit and looked at the two of them with sharp eyes. Ah, never mind. Just tell me everything. Seeing the boss smiling deviously as he cracked his bones loudly, no one present had the guts to object. When ERU was piloting Guile in the fight against the behemoth, Dietrich was watching from behind, so he didn't have any ideas on how he piloted. Guru's skills were not something that could be understood through observation, so he had to do the explaining. It was fine in the beginning, but they ran into problems immediately. Pardon, say that again. Okay, I took the seat, but my limbs couldn't reach the controls and pedals, so I read it through the script in the Magus engine and controlled the silhouette knight by processing it myself. The boss, who always had a scary face, opened his eyes wide in surprise, a rare sight. That was understandable, the Magus engine exists because it was impossible for a person to keep up with the script processing. Doing the processing by yourself goes beyond common sense. Dietrich, who experienced the movement of Guile firsthand, aside, no one could have stopped the boss' expression from turning doubtful. Dietrich's expression, on the other hand, turned sharp. Even if I believe everything you said is true, then what? What does it have to do with this fellow breaking apart because of mana depletion? I took the place of the Magus engine, which meant I could control all functions of the machine freely. When I was delivering the final blow to the behemoth, I turned off the safety device, using all my remaining mana in that attack. In the end, I accidentally used up the mana that was keeping the structure intact. Damn it, how do you want me to resolve the issue that way? The limiter was meant to keep the mana from depleting completely. The boss had a stern tone, but he could only shake his head at Aru's recklessness. He breathed out a sigh that was exceptionally heavy, and gave up on lecturing ERU. That might be so, but I am the only one who can control it that way, so you are not in a hurry to solve this, right? Of course, it would be a disaster if it could be done easily. Forget it, and the crystal tissue snapping from fatigue was related to you, too, right? No, you broke it, right? You are right, but being told that in my face still makes me unhappy. Can it, so it really is your fault? That was the burden of full control. Guile was under an abnormal amount of strain and broke. This made our situation desperate, too. After replacing it with new parts, it should operate smoothly for more than a month. But you broke it in just one battle. The boss couldn't help looking up and covering his forehead with his palm. At this point, he couldn't do anything about it. The work on hand was already a headache, but he noticed the possibility of something worse happening. Hey, wait, boy, if you get serious, would all the machines you pilot get destroyed? The possibility is high. The cardator operated by the Knights has better crystal tissue, so it would probably last longer. So it's a problem of bearing the load, ERU grumbled casually. The boss glanced at him through slitted eyes and his face turned sour. TCH. If I don't improve this, I would lose face as a craftsman. That might be so, but I can't solve the problem immediately. Speaking of which, pilots that would be so reckless were unheard of, so it's natural for the solution to not exist. Anyway, this was not a problem this facility could tackle. Finding an answer to improve the design was not something you could settle it in one day. The repairs would be left for later, the research to solve this issue would be done later. The boss secretly came up with a plan. Unfortunately, there was someone who treats unrealistic options as something normal. If that is so, I just happen to have a great idea. And there is no downside to it. The most important thing right now is increasing the toughness of the crystal tissue, right? That person was ERU. He raised his hand cheerfully, saying something shocking in a loud voice. Increase the toughness of the crystal tissue. That is easy to say, but how long do you think alchemists spent researching that? In fact, there has been no breakthrough for the past 100 years. No. When I say increasing toughness, I am not referring to the crystal tissue itself. I lack the expertise on alchemy anyway, so I want to work on the way crystal tissue is used. In the face of the people who were popping out question marks because of the term used, ERU used this chance to explain. Here is how an old story goes: one arrow is easy to break, but it is hard to do so when three of them are tied together. which means his proposal was to bind several crystal tissue together in the form of a rope. By combining the weak individual strands together, the toughness could be increased. By braiding it together, it could improve its elasticity compared to longer strands and enhance power output. I call it strand crystal tissue. What do you think? ERU was brimming with smiles, like a salesman concluding his pitch. Following this, he braided the crystal tissue on the spot and presented the flexible rope for everyone to see. The twins didn't seem to understand, just accepting everything ERU said. Batson and the craftsmen present reacted very strongly. The boss picked up the crystal tissue with a slow and deliberate motion and studied it. He started shaking his hand and then fell deep into thought. With his past experience of attempting to improve the silhouette knight, he wanted to say something, but gave up after failing to find the words. The boss sighed and said, "To combine the crystal tissue through braiding, this is a blind spot." He was usually serious when talking, but the words he said were filled with mixed emotion. Is that so? It's strange that no one ever tried it though. The boy is right. It does seem weird hearing you say that, but improving the silhouette knight usually starts from the inner skeleton and the placement of the crystal tissue, or enhancing the quality of the materials. No one would think about changing the crystal tissue this way. Silhouette knight is a gigantic weapon that mimics a human knight. Based on the idea of amplifying the power of men, it had the shape of humans. Although it had the advantage of being easy to pilot and to understand, it also limited new ideas to the human shape, holding back its development. A pure machine that is piloted like a human, this contradiction was rooted deeply into their psyche. The architects of silhouette knights lost the idea of making breakthroughs from the very basics. ERU could overcome this because of his knowledge from a different world, where robotics was very developed. Even though his face was covered by his beard, the boss was smiling happily at this moment, a rare sight. Haha. After thinking it through, this idea is interesting. The time is just right, let's install this thing in that machine we are repairing. The bright and cheery boss made the students take a step back. But the boss was occupied by the Silhouette Knight's enhancement project and didn't mind it one bit, preparing to give the order to the others. By the way, could I make another suggestion? How about changing the exterior shape too? The whisper of the devil came into the boss' ears. The boss digested the meaning of these words and turned back slowly. Before him was ERU, who had a sparkling smile. "Boss, I am thinking of adding arms onto the back." The boy looked as cute as a girl, saying words gently while smiling like a flower. But the content was incredible. This couldn't be described as insufficient explanation, but more like the realm of insanity. The boss did hear the words clearly, but it took him a much longer time than before to understand. Even the twins, who were used to Aru's erratic nature, couldn't hide their bafflement. The one who was most calm was Batson, who had heard plenty of his ridiculous ideas. For the craftsman who didn't even think about improving the Silhouette Knight until moments ago, Aru's words were incomprehensible. Logically speaking, Silhouette Knights should be a weapon, in the shape of a man. And in this world, men usually have 2 arms and legs. Only characters in fairy tales go beyond this norm, so apart from ERU, no one could understand where the idea of adding arms to the back of the Silhouette Knight came from. The stunned boss sighed deeply and wanted to retort, but dropped that idea. It would be nonsense if these words came from someone else, but this was coming from ERU, who proposed the new idea of the strand crystal tissue. The boss suppressed his voice and struggled to keep his heart normal and asked, Just to be clear, I should ask to clarify. Why? How? Even though he was doing his best to suppress it, the boss couldn't keep his voice from trembling. As for why, I discovered the last time I piloted a Silhouette Knight that they only have 2 arms. Hey, that is obvious, do you need to bring it up? Huh. Sighed, calm down 80. Let me finish. I think the issue lies with the control of the Silhouette arms. In order to conduct long-range attacks, the Silhouette Knight has to use Silhouette arms. The armaments have to be operated by hands, so there is a need to change between sword and armaments according to distance and the situation. ERU stopped and looked around. All the faces had the same, that is obvious, what is the problem, expression on them. His smile deepened. But I think that is inefficient, there would be a gap when changing the weapons, too. Obviously, there is no choice but to store the Silhouette arms in close-distance combat. So, I am thinking of putting something at the back, something like a hand that could operate a Silhouette arms. That way, there would be no need to change weapons and the Silhouette arms would be available anytime. Everyone wasn't buying Aru's explanation wholesale and had a deeply confused look. They felt something wasn't right and didn't know how to express it in that awkward atmosphere. The one who moved was the leader of the engineers, the boss. Quote. I know what you are getting at. Let's leave how to increase the number of arms aside. If we really do add another arm, how would it be controlled? Humans don't have arms on their back, I don't need to explain that, right? You can't control things you don't have. Without needing the boss to point it out, almost everyone was thinking the same thing. Silhouette Knight's control was based on the movement of the pilot's limbs. With this system, it was impossible for the pilot to control parts that humans do not have. Wrong, there was no need to bring out structural logic. Emotionally, they were resisting the addition of parts which humans do not have. It would be the best to laugh this off as nonsense. Such thoughts were formed silently and were the common thoughts of everyone present. But Aru's smile did not disappear, and he didn't stop his advance. He is a product of an alternate world, journeying alone outside of the common sense of this world, happily redesigning the existence known as Silhouette Knights. I understand your concerns, but I am not proposing adding a real arm, so it doesn't have to be as agile as one. In simple terms, it just needs to hold the silhouette arms and shoot, that's all. Which means. Eru took in everyone's confusion and repulsion, describing it casually. The strongest thing that was pushing him was his will and clear objective. Slowly, everyone was convinced by his words. At the same time, an automated movement script with aiming functions would be added. A device that could control the movement of the silhouette arms. This is my proposal, the development of the back weapon and the fire control system. There was a small area in the corner of the workshop separated by boards, dubbed the conference room. Even though Aru's proposal deviated widely from common sense, the group didn't reject it and gathered here for a discussion. Eru explained with a clear voice, his chalk making rhythmic sounds on the board, gradually drawing out the whole picture of the alien-shaped machine. Although I used the word arm, what I wanted was a simpler design, something that could hold an object firmly. The additional arm, named auxiliary arm, henceforth would be kept when the silhouette arms were not in use, and would be deployed when in combat, ready to fire. When deployed, the auxiliary arm would mount the weapon over the shoulder, facing forward. The fire control system is the script responsible for the deployment and the retraction of the auxiliary arm. This movement doesn't require much flexibility, it just needs to be able to deploy and retract the auxiliary arm. Hence, it wouldn't be a burden on the pilot and could be completed automatically by the system. Just hearing this much, the fire control system script seemed to be used only to point the armament forward, but its main feature was the aiming function. Displaying a reticle on the holo monitor, the script links it to the silhouette arms to control the direction of fire. At this point in Aru's presentation, the expression of the craftsman changed. To use the silhouette arms without interfering with the use of the hands, it even made the addition of an aiming reticle possible. Although the pilots are the experts in controlling Silhouette Knights, the craftsmen doing maintenance also have the related skills. That's why they could understand the advantage the back weapon brings, increasing the opportunity to attack, more variation in tactics, and the possibility of stronger attacks. The plan is to install the functionality of the fire control script into the unused area of the Magus engine. I will be doing that part. Also, the pilot using this function needs to. Pilots just needs to be trained in using the aiming function. The reason was simple, they do not need delicate control to use the auxiliary arm, and the fire control system would automatically deploy, retract and even aim. The control could be done through the pilot seat easily, so there wasn't any burden when controlling it. If the pilot needs to adjust to the modification, then the training program of the pilots needs to be adjusted. Quote. That's the summary of the proposal. Further details would be finalized when production begins. How does everyone feel about this? Facing Eru, who was cutely tilting his head, no one gave a response. Right now, a terrifying silence was controlling the workshop. Aru's technology had turned their perceived common sense on its head, adding parts which deviates from the human form and installing scripts in the untouchable Magus engine. Even though they had accepted the idea of strand crystal tissue, Aru's proposal was very abnormal to the students present. Eru explained himself clearly, the common language of the engineers was displayed on the board, technology. It had no fantasy or fairy tales, with a taste of reality, it couldn't be ignored with a laugh, and it was full of charms, making it hard to resist. Seemed like I've still got it in me. My presentation skills haven't gotten rusty. But they still need another push. In Aru's eyes, the maintenance students were obviously lost. It's fine if the presentation wasn't good enough, they could reject it directly. But the problem was that it was feasible enough to be discussed. Their cultivated common sense was warning them something was wrong, but when ERU brought out the revolution this technology could bring, their logic pulled them to accept it. In order to push the group who were caught in this dilemma and fell into silence, ERU continued. Even though Silhouette Night mimics the form of men, it is still a tool, a machine. There is no need to be hung up on it being in the form of men. If there is a function that is needed, don't you think that it's fine to modify how it looks? If a devil appeared in any story, it would probably give off this feeling. A beautiful appearance whispering sweet temptations in your ears, luring you away from the straight and limited path of the world as everyone's thought were heading down this divergent path, the boss sighed in an exaggerated manner. Really, just who the hell are you? Be it the strand crystal tissue or the back weapon, I don't understand how you keep thinking up things we have never seen, or heard of before. How should I put it? I want to do it because it doesn't exist. I wouldn't have done it if it had already existed. ERU pouted, prompting the boss to stare at him for a long while before laughing out loud. The boss' hearty laughter swept all the doubts and gloom of everyone who were present away. Keke, ha ha ha. You got me. Yes, you are right. Kick reason to the curb, right? I like it. It might be frustrating, but the boy has a point. We craftsmen are professionals who improve Silhouette Nights. I will accept your proposal. With this as the cue, the engineers' curiosity won against their hesitation. As one, they unanimously moved towards the development of the strand crystal tissue, back weapon and fire control system, a step towards the revolution of a new Silhouette Night model. It might be a small step, but there was a definite change in their mindset. And so, the ripple that started in LightNovel Pilot Academy will one day spread through the nation, and push the evolution of the existence known as Silhouette Nights to the entire world. 4 figures walked in a row in LightNovel Academy City, which was basked in the light of the setting sun. The petite one walking in the middle, ERU, was in a great mood, and seemed to be on the verge of singing. That was understandable, he didn't expect to fulfill his ambition of modifying a Silhouette Night. When he thought about the coming days, ERU felt overwhelming joy. Compared to the chirpy ERU, CHID and 80 beside him seemed gloomy. Hey ERU, to be honest, I didn't understand everything that happened today. But if the modification goes well, the Silhouette Nights would become stronger, right? Yes, of course. CHID wanted to say something, but seemed hesitant. Hey ERU, after strengthening the Silhouette Night, are you going to fight the demon beast again? Chid's words made ERU blink with a stiff smile. Baru's mind was filled with the modification and totally forgot about how to apply it practically. Facing this unexpected query, ERU cleared his throat to dismiss the anxiety in his heart and forced a smile. That's right. It's a rare chance to create powerful Silhouette Nights after all, and think about it. And becoming a knight or pilot means fighting demon beasts. That's true, ERU has to fight, and you are ready to do so. ERU looked surprised by Chid's hesitant expression, and was hugged from the side by 80. Ru. You didn't forget that promise, right? Huh. Yeah. About teaching both of you how to fight with Silhouette Nights, right? Correct. If we put our mind to it, we can do it. I absolutely forbid you from fighting alone again. 80 remembered the wreckage of the Red Silhouette Night. Even though Silhouette Nights were known as the strongest weapon of men, there were still a lot of demon beasts in this world that were stronger than them. When 80 thought that ERU might be in danger, her tears would blur her vision, and the sounds would blur. 80. Are you okay? Don't worry, I had thought about preparation for that too. Oh, right. How about asking them to do that too? ERU seemed to be thinking of something and snapped his fingers. 80 lifted her face slightly, while Batson and CHID looked at each other with a confused expression. Several days later, ERU and the boss came to the LightNovel Pilot Academy's dean office. Hearing a polite knock, a calm response came from the dean, Laurie Echevarria, who was inside. Even though Laurie was a bit surprised, he still ushered them in. Oh, ERU and David, what a rare combination. Laurie offered them a seat as ERU gave him some documents. Inside was the report summarizing the proposal for the strand crystal tissue, the back weapon and the fire control system. Dean, the document inside contains the proposal for a Silhouette Night brought up by the Silver Boy. The maintenance department wants to create a new Silhouette Night using this plan. Laurie's eyes were wide open after hearing these sudden words, and studied the documents carefully. After browsing through it once, he placed the documents on the table and exhaled deeply. Laurie looked into the distance and said, "Ara, should I say this is unexpected, you two have stirred up something troublesome. It's your grandson who did that. That's why it was unexpected, should I say beyond my imagination. I didn't think that you would start so soon. This report seems very unusual. Can it be done?" Eru smiled like usual when he was asked, but Laurie, who was his family, understood that Aru's blue eyes contained unusual passion, confidence and the will to challenge the norm. And as he expected, Eru nodded strongly in agreement. "Your Majesty, my grandson is wilder than I imagined. He will probably go beyond my control." Grandpa. What do you think? Are you willing to accept it? Dean, we should have the freedom in the production and modification of Silhouette Knights. But the core of the modification is different from the past, so there would definitely be many problems. That's why we are seeking official authorization. Laurie, whose thoughts were somewhere far away, specifically the capital, was pulled back because of these words. Yes. A lot of the knights had to be reforged because of damage, so the timing is just right. Some failures are acceptable, just do it the way you want to. No, we can't afford to be slow, we have to finish it quickly. If there are not enough knights, the pilots won't be able to practice. Laurie suddenly slapped his knee. The Behemoth incident destroyed half the knights of the Academy. Even at the full strength of 20, it was not enough for all the pilots in the Academy, and they had to take turns. With half of it gone, it would definitely affect training. About that, I have another proposal. Eru raised his hand strongly and opened the briefcase beside him, taking out a notebook. Hey, so that wasn't all. You are well prepared, boy. I have been thinking about this for quite some time. To conduct Silhouette Knight piloting practice, you have to ride a Silhouette Knight. But the number of the important Silhouette Knights is limited, and takes a lot of effort to make new ones, a vicious cycle. Laurie and the boss suppressed their doubts and nodded. Eru opened his notebook that was bulging from a lot of sticky tabs and showed them the newest page. But increasing the number of Silhouette Knight presents another set of problems. First would be the expensive parts, reactors and engines, and the specialized workshop to handle large machines and manpower. Taking the cost into account, there is only one answer. Laurie and the boss listened to Aru's explanation, squeezing together to look at the notebook filled with words. On it was a strange object, a combination of a human skeleton with armor, which was filled with crystal tissue. According to the notes, it was about 2.5 meters in height, slightly bigger than a normal person wearing armor. But it was about a quarter the scale of a Silhouette Knight. That's right, just make it smaller. That will cut down the work, and the facilities to construct it can be smaller in scale too. In other words, it can be mass-produced easily. Silhouette Knights need ether reactors and Magus engine because a single person can't provide the mana and process the script to control such a large body. If the machine is smaller, the burden would be lessened, too. It could be operated by just one person. It doesn't require the heart units, so the price would definitely be cheaper. If you order one now, you can get another one for free. Hearing the long sales pitch of Eru, one would suspect him of being a merchant from somewhere. Laurie and the boss had different reactions. Tiny Silhouette Knights. You are not satisfied with the new model, and are plotting that too. I see, but this thing sounds interesting. How about it, David? If it goes smoothly, the pilots won't be bored out of their mind. Hearing Laurie say that, the boss adopted a troubled attitude. Dean, I have no objection about making this, but making the new model and this at the same time will be too much, in terms of manpower. Even if it is easy to make, we simply can't do both. Constructing the new Silhouette Knight. That is a tedious mission that is troubling when you just to think about it. The boss and the engineers don't have the spare energy to work on other projects. Without the craftsmen working on it, it doesn't matter how interesting the idea was. But Eru was prepared for this. Don't worry about this part. The good thing about this is its simplicity compared to Silhouette Knights, and it is easy to make. I think it could be done even without the skills of the senpai in the high school department. Understanding what Eru was saying, the expression of these two finally went beyond surprise and turned expressionless. The boss sighed deeply. Boy, I didn't know you would go that far. The boss was definitely not complimenting him, but Eru simply smiled in reply. Volume 2, Chapter 11. Let's design, build and assemble. The plan proposed by the pilot faculty's maintenance department breaking out of the mold of repairing Silhouette Knights, they had started the building process of the new machine model for half a month now. During this period, the school had resumed classes, and the middle schooler Ernesty had returned to his usual daily life. The bell announcing the end of lessons rang, and the classroom that was quiet when class was in session turned rowdy. The teacher sighed at the sudden change in the students and left after bidding farewell. The day's lesson had finished and school was out. The students who were free from class could spend their time as they pleased. Even though they could be attacked by Demon Beast if they took a step out of the city, the existence known as students remained the same. It applied to ERU and the others, too, although their situation was different. ERU. Let's go practice. Come, we have to work hard today, too. All right, you don't need to pull so hard, I will go with you. Adi couldn't wait as she pulled Aru's hand and Chid followed behind them. They attend classes in middle school during the day, and head for the pilot faculty's workshop when school is out. This was their daily schedule recently. The workshop was noisy as usual. But the situation today was different. ERU and the others who were chattering when they arrived felt the heavy atmosphere. They saw the boss, who was resting on a chair, and approached him. Hello boss. Why does everyone look so tired today? Ah, Silver Boy, nothing much, it's just that thing. We made the strand crystal tissue. The thing suggested by ERU. Correct, but I didn't expect the pilot faculty to need a bobbin machine. The clothing faculty's people insisted that we do it seriously, and showed us no mercy. The boss' eyes were out of focus, a hint of sorrow that couldn't be described as an achievement. The three of them almost bursted out laughing when they imagined the muscle-bound dwarf using a bobbin machine. That must have been hilarious. Well, thank you for your hard work, boss. Thank you, but it was worth it. Nah, look at this. The document the boss tossed to ERU listed a lot of numbers, listing the difference when using normal crystal tissue compared to strand crystal tissue in different situations. Other than that, there was also comparison data for different braiding methods. During the strand crystal tissue creation process, they discovered that using good braiding methods were more effective than simple braiding. When I requested the clothing faculty to show me the various ways of braiding crystal tissue, they almost called for a shrink. The information they gathered from their honorable sacrifice was priceless. The best braiding method improved the maximum power output by 1.5 times. The tightly braided tissues went through repeated stretching tests, displaying a toughness 10 times stronger than before. It's better than we expected. I thought the output would increase by 20%, and the lifespan would be extended 2 times. Ha! You are the proposer, but don't think we didn't do anything. I don't deny that I am cocky because I attained actual results. I just wanted to test it out, but the results varied wildly depending on how it was used. I think the parts that were used casually have a lot of room for improvement. As he spoke, the boss laughed like an innocent child. Standing next to ERU, it was hard to tell who was the little kid. As the two of them were discussing the results, there was a sudden uproar coming from within the workshop, and someone was shouting for the boss. Boss. The replacement for the arm tissue had been completed. Oh, I will be right there. We are going to test the strand model. Boy, come with us, too. Of course, please let me see it. At the edge of the workshop was a giant figure with some of the armor around the right arm removed, revealing the crystal tissue underneath. The tissues of the arm were thick, which were obviously strand crystal tissue. If the tissue had the same color as living beings, it would definitely be a scene that was not for the faint-hearted. Fortunately, the crystal tissue was murky white. Placed inside the giant body of the silhouette knight, it gave an impression of being a statue. All right, step back. We will be doing test movements. ... Good, please proceed, Helvi. Roger. Proceeding now. The students working in the vicinity dispersed. The pilot, Helvi Oberg, entered the machine seated on the repair dock. The hatch in the chest slowly closed with the sound of compressed air. They had already investigated the mana output of the crystal tissue, but this was the first time they were testing it in an actual machine. The eyes of the students in the area were sparkling with anticipation, watching with bated breath. The right arm installed with the strand model gripped a giant metal lump. The silhouette knight obeyed the command to lift its arm, and the crystal tissue could be seen contracting and bulging through the gaps of the armor. Oh, that is amazing. It has great strength, right? The metal lump lifted by the unit required a normal silhouette knight to use both hands in order to lift it. But it accomplished this easily with one hand. The power output of the strand crystal tissue was incredible. Maybe it was because of the unique nature of the strand model, or the lack of outer skin, but cracking sounds could be heard. Power output increment and toughness enhancement seem to be proceeding fine. Right now we can produce a machine that won't break down easily even if the boy pilots it. As ERU and the boss were passionately discussing the experiment results, a sound was getting louder, and a noise that didn't seem to be from the crystal tissue could be heard. By the way, boss, do you hear something? It sounds like friction. What a coincidence, you heard that too. So, I didn't imagine that, what did you say? The two looked at each other, and the instant they turned towards the machine they heard a crisp bang, and the right arm literally broke. The crystal tissue fell off and the arm loosened, dropping the metal lump onto the ground. But no one cared about that. The reason was that the armor was sent flying by the snapped crystal tissue, scattering all over. It's no joke if you get hit by the armor. Fragments of Silhouette Knight, and hellish screams erupted in the workshop. Wah! Ah, it's coming this way. Unfortunately, one of it flew towards the boss. ERU stepped before him in the nick of time, drawing his gun staff Winchester to repel the fragments. ERU lowered his stance, shooting out a massive amount of compressed air, deflecting the force of the fragments away. The fragment made a dull explosive sound, drawing a large arc in the air before embedding itself in the wall behind them. The boss, who was in the pilot faculty, was a craftsman. Together with the lack of agility of the dwarves, it's impossible to expect an immediate reaction. He shielded his body and stood stiffly in place like a statue. After a while, the boss looked at the fragment stuck in the wall behind him. After seeing the fragment embedded deep in the wall, the boss couldn't utter a sound. CHID and 80 also maintained their position with their bayonet staffs out. The place was awkwardly silent. The boss returned to his senses in no time and immediately inspected the machine that exploded. The right hand was wrecked from the impact and looked terrible. The crystal tissue was scattered all over the place, even the inner skeleton was visible. ERU timidly asked the boss, who was enthusiastically inspecting the right arm. Quote, Boss, tell us what you think. Right there. The crystal tissue itself is fine, but the base securing it to the structure snapped. The tissue increased the output too high, so the other parts couldn't keep up. So, that's why. We really lost to it. The boss, who was laughing dryly, shut his mouth shortly after. After meeting Aru's gaze, the two of them sighed deeply. Normal means wouldn't work, we would need to modify the entire body this time. Even though the machine was damaged, miraculously, no one was hurt because it was kept at a distance. The students who crawled out cautiously sighed as they looked at the wrecked right arm. Strand crystal tissue still had a way to go before practical application. Anyway, they have to reevaluate and use new methods to secure the tissues. It takes time going through the reevaluation from the beginning. The personnel involved in the designs would be busy for the foreseeable future. Well then, boss, I will leave this to you. We will go ahead with our training. You take care of that side, for now. Okay, hey, stop standing around. We are starting over with strengthening the clamps. He looked a bit down, but the boss didn't give up and threw himself into the work at hand. ERU left the workshop that was getting noisy because of the repairs, following CHID and 80 to another corner of the workshop. There were no Silhouette Knights there, instead there were several, full-body armor, that had interesting designs. Its height was big for a human, but it was just 2.5 meters, small for a Silhouette Knight. The head and body were similar to a normal full-body armor, the limbs were exceptionally long, and the ratio was off. Hello Batson, how are things going? Oh, ERU. No problem, the Silhouette gear is in top condition today, too. I can vouch for that. Batson answered as he flexed the muscles in his arm. The name for this full-body armor was Silhouette gear, a substitute for a Silhouette Knight made through the plans proposed by ERU. It could be considered as a mini Silhouette Knight. The row of Silhouette gears was being worked on by students other than Batson. From their height, it was obvious that they were not from the high school department, but middle schoolers. The main point of the Silhouette gear design was the miniaturizing and simplification of Silhouette Knights, so the difficulty level was low. Even middle schoolers, who were aiming to be craftsmen, could build it. Batson being involved was a good example, but he had already made a bunch of weird stuff because of his acquaintance with ERU. Well then, we will work hard for our training. ERU just finished talking when CHID and 80 replied energetically. Speaking of which, the Silhouette gear was something he thought up in order to teach them how to pilot a Silhouette Knight, and was used to solve the issue of insufficient machines on campus. CHID and 80 were full of spirit, but so was ERU. For him, even though it was smaller, piloting a robot still made him happy. Silhouette gear was similar to normal armor, the movements were dictated directly by the user, and needed to be built to the user's size. For example, ERU was using a machine that had been adjusted for a person with small stature to use. CHID and 80's machine were slightly bigger. ERU stood before the silhouette gear that was kneeling on the ground with the chest armor open, but he didn't board it immediately and hugged the torso instead. Seeing ERU smiling with his mouth open, CHID, who was behind, couldn't help saying, "I know you like it, but no matter how much love you shower it with, it won't respond to you. No such thing. If you shower it with love, it would be obedient to you." CHID looked at his silhouette gear in doubt. Is that really true? How could it be? A weird argument flashed across his mind. No, no way. CHID came to his senses when he was just about to be convinced. ERU only loves silhouette gear. CHID, shut up and board it. Training, we are starting training now. Oh, alright, is this my fault? CHID was rushed by 80, who had already boarded, grumbling slightly as he sat in one of the gears. With the metal closing shut, the sound of air escaping could be heard, and the full body armor was enclosed and secured. CHID then grabbed the control inside the silhouette gear's arm, moving the machine's limbs directly as he controlled it with a script at the same time. The silhouette gear was designed to be controlled in the same way as silhouette knights for training purposes. I am starting it. He started using the unique organs common to all beings in this world, the Magus circuit domain, to construct a script. The crystal tissue installed inside the gear obeyed the script in the flowing mana, and started to contract and expand. The gear trembled, and stood up a moment later. The mana they put in during activation would be used to move the gear, a machine that directly converted mana into physical movement. They rode the silhouette gear and noisily walked outside the workshop. After making their way to the training ground behind, there were already some other guests there. "Hello, Edgar-senpai. How does it feel using that?" Ernesty, you could tell just by looking, right? The pilot cadet belonging to the pilot faculty, Edgar C. Blanche, was piloting a gear that was made for a tall person. He greeted them as he lifted the legs to walk in large strides. His movements were rough and seemed to take a lot of effort. He was not as good as ERU, who could ride the silhouette gear like it was second nature. Edgar was still really serious about it. "I see, that looks interesting." ERU nodded as he watched Edgar. Edgar stiffened his already serious face and looked up slightly. ERU knew he had a hard time piloting, but for ERU, the hardship of piloting a robot equals a happy thing. Because ERU thought that from the bottom of his heart, ERU was hard to deal with. Edgar understood that and gave up convincing him. Instead, he crossed his arms and brought something else up. "Hey Ernesty, I have been thinking about this. This silhouette gear isn't bad, but I think it's too hard to use." Edgar had a hard time piloting it because of the control method. Controlling with his actual limbs and script at the same time wasn't a problem, the issue was the type of magic used. Piloting requires high-level magic, physical boost. Even a top-class pilot cadet like him couldn't do it well. It's even worse for normal cadets. The necessary controls are too complicated. The script controlling silhouette knights requires less burden than this. It's not unusable, but definitely not for pilot training. In fact, everyone had already given up. Edgar surveyed the training grounds. There were just a few others apart from him. Everybody was complaining after trying it a few times. "Yes, you are right. I underestimated the difficulty level." "Then make it up with hard work." "Nah, look at me senpai, we can do this." Edgar looked at ERU, CHID and 80 in turns and sighed softly. CHID and 80 didn't care about the high school pilots, controlling the silhouette knight with ease. This was the result of them learning magic from ERU and training together, but others would only lump them together with ERU as abnormal people. Don't ask the impossible, this is not something that could be done in a day or two, right? Really, I know how weird you guys are. At this point, I won't say anything more, just don't expect normal people to catch up with you guys. Hamad, it's a pity, but this can't be used. That would be true if there are no improvements. This is a mini version of a silhouette knight, right? Then install a Magus engine. That should cut down on the piloting burden drastically. Edgar told ERU his suggestion. It made sense. If this goes on, it won't be usable for the high schoolers, although it's fine for ERU and the others. That's the only way. This would increase the cost, but it can't be helped, so that's the only option. But this method presented its own set of problems. The small frame of the silhouette gear couldn't hold the ether reactor of the silhouette knight. The main idea was the miniaturization of the machine, but no matter how much of a genius ERU was, he didn't know the structure of the Magus engine. So this problem couldn't be resolved immediately. What a pitiful sight, Edgar. As the top knight of the pilot faculty, I didn't expect you to give up so easily. Hearing a voice coming from behind him, Edgar turned his head. Before him was Dietrich, who was slowly walking towards him in a silhouette gear, with movements more refined than Edgar. Die, it's rare to see you so fired up. Unexpectedly, Dietrich was serious about learning how to control the silhouette gear. His movement was smoother than Edgar, while Edgar appeared a bit frustrated. Dietrich, who was feeling great about that, worked harder. As he was preparing to take a large step, tragedy struck. HMMP, this level is easy, eh? What? This is bad, I can't stop. Although his movement was crisper than Edgar, Dietrich hadn't mastered it. Because he used too much strength and made a mistake in the controls, the upper torso cracked loudly and bent at an impossible angle. Everyone who saw this had an anxious expression. Dai senpai. Why, it's an emergency, send senpai to the infirmary. When the panicking ERU mentioned the taboo word, Dietrich recovered with amazing spirit. Not just that, he even spun around gracefully and struck a strange pose, saying curtly, I will definitely not go to the infirmary. This is nothing. There is absolutely no need. He posed agilely, but his forehead was sweating profusely. Was this the result of physical or mental injury? Everyone was stunned and Dietrich walked towards the workshop while laughing in a loud voice. Edgar, who composed himself, followed in a hurry. Senpai seems to be fine. Let's start our training. After blankly seeing their senpai off, ERU and the others finally started their training. ERU was obviously fine, but the twins could already move around freely. So they raised the difficulty and conducted something similar to a battle simulation. Silhouette gear has controls similar to silhouette knights, and it's in the form of full control. Control the movement of the crystal tissue, feel the flow of the mana. Control script. The two of you can move even faster. As if it's that simple. Training was done with CHID and 80 fighting 2-on-1 against ERU. Even so, the twins had never won before. They harbored the determination to get at least one win and launched the attack with perfect coordination. CHID lifted a great sword and charged at ERU, using the length of the sword to take the initiative. Maru's machine opted to close the distance instead. With the large difference in agility, it became Chid's turn to be on defense. Oh, no. ERU is pressing in. 80. Leave it to me. I will break off his attack. 80 shouted, attacking ERU, who was attacking CHID from the side. The machine lifted dual blades just like what its pilot preferred to use. It attacked continuously like a storm, but it failed to even touch ERU, who evaded all the strikes. But even though 80 didn't gain any advantage, the 2-on-1 situation remained the same. This time, it was Chid's turn to attack Aru's defensive gap when ERU was dodging. The great sword swung down with terrifying speed and was about to hit. Nice teamwork, but with an explosive sound, ERU, whose posture was very low, suddenly accelerated. As he piloted the silhouette gear, he used his own power to accelerate with air compression magic. ERU jumped with a force threatening to heave up the ground, landing behind 80, who was preparing to change her position. She wanted to escape in a hurry, but was caught by ERU, who tossed her at CHID, who was swinging his sword down. Ugh. The machines couldn't stop in time and collided. Looking at the two people he just beat, ERU nodded with satisfaction. It's a bit small, but human-shaped weapons are great. Power and drive are flowing out endlessly. How long are you two planning to lie there? Let's continue. Sai, don't you think ERU is even stricter than the time he was teaching magic? It's no coincidence. If it has anything to do with silhouette gear, ERU will become vicious, can't be helped. Alright, let's have another round. They cheered themselves up and challenged Aru's machine again. It's fine if you want to train, but I'm the one who is doing the repairs, so don't break them. The complaints of Batson, who was watching this scene, dissipated into the wind. As the days got colder, the season changed from summer to autumn. The busy days of everyone passed by. Since ERU proposed the plans for strand crystal tissue and back weapons, several months had passed. With the continuous efforts of the pilot faculty's maintenance team, they finally completed a prototype machine. Ara, we finally reached this stage. The boss complained, unable to hide the fatigue in his voice. Some of the students had panda eyes, some were massaging their shoulders, and all of them gave off a heavy sense of fatigue. The few months before the completion of the prototype were a living hell. The one responsible for designs drew all sorts of plans, and the crafting leader completed every one of them. The machine took shape after several trials and errors, no wonder they were so exhausted. They might be students, but their skills were at the level of professional craftsmen. But this project was a grueling challenge. The harsh everyday conditions made them wonder, why hasn't anyone died? To reach this stage without losing their motivation, it was due to their boundless joy in developing new technologies. The evidence was their eyes that were full of passion despite being worn out. Okay, bring it out. Slowly. If you drop it, it won't be settled with just a simple beating. Everyone carried the finished prototype to the trolley, sending it out of the workshop carefully. That thing was a bit strange. Its body was covered by a minimal layer known as primary armor, to protect its interior. Crystal tissue could even be seen from some of the parts. Only the chest and limbs were covered by outer skin, giving the impression of incompleteness. The prototype was quickly sent to the pilot faculty's training ground, which had the shape of a circular arena. After reaching the center of the training ground, the chest of the prototype, which was lying down, was opened, allowing the test pilot Helvey to enter the pilot seat. Everyone from the maintenance team was seated in the audience seats of the arena to observe. In front of them were giant shields that protected them, a lesson they learned from the accident they had earlier. It was natural for them to be cautious. Even though they did several testing for the individual parts, this was the first time the entire assembled body would be tested. To be safe, they removed some of the larger auxiliary parts. Okay, Helvey, are you ready? For starters, stand up. The boss held a loud hailer and yelled. With this as the cue, the prototype started to stand up. The maintenance team members watched its movement closely. The creaking prototype slowly sat up, its movement stiffer than a normal machine, and was very slow. The arms braced the body, the legs bent. From afar, the legs that were exerting strength could be seen bulging. After spending quite some time, the prototype machine finally stood up. It's standing. An emotional voice came from somewhere. When he thought about the efforts they put in to make it stand, the difficulties they overcame and the sacrifices, that voice was trembling. Completing this movement that was totally dependent on the power of the leg tissue, it was evident that the structure of the prototype machine could withstand the minimum output of the strand crystal tissue. Not yet, be careful now, you over there. Don't stick your body out. It's dangerous. All right, steady, Helvey, try walking. Slowly, slowly. The head of the prototype machine moved up and down, expressing understanding. After stopping for a moment, it decided to walk. Although it was in the center of the training ground paved with stone slabs, its footsteps were extremely careful. It seemed to be walking on a hanging bridge that could break at any time, its speed slower than an ox-driven cart. With the sound of heavy steps and churning muscles, it took quite a while to make it halfway around the training ground. The stabilizing components are still in place, it should be able to hold. Because it had no outer skin, they couldn't be careless. But at least it didn't seem like it would break any time soon. The prototype machine moved to the front of the students of the maintenance team, and knelt on one knee with an even slower motion. It adopted the position of a silhouette knight on standby and stopped completely. Only then did the members of the maintenance team sigh in relief. After a moment of silence, there was an eruption of cheers. This was the moment the walking test succeeded, the moment where their past trial and errors bore fruit. The chest armor of the prototype machine opened and Helvey appeared. She was probably still nervous as she was breathing hard and was wiping her sweat. Hey, Helvey, how did it feel to pilot that? The boss, who had looked happy after the successful experiment, asked. Helvey replied with a hint of bitterness. It was literally a wild horse. There was too much energy, just walking took a lot of effort. It's that bad. Yes, the sensation was completely different from the other machines I piloted. To be honest, everyone would need to be retrained. I see, to improve to the stage of walking was a great achievement, but the piloting system still needs to be worked on. That would be left for later. Okay, it might not be too agile now, but since it had no problem walking, all that's left is to check the other parts. Helvey nodded and returned to the pilot seat. After the guys in the maintenance confirmed their safety and picked up their shields, they proceeded to the next phase. Unmodified silhouette knights carried large target boards into the training ground and placed them on the ground one by one. The boss made his way to the stone-paved training ground and kept issuing orders to the students around him. All right, bring in the silhouette arms. For training use. Put the target board at the corner. And someone get the silver boy here. He is probably wandering around in his silhouette gear anyway, it's easy to spot him if you search around the vicinity. Around Lahila Pilot Academy were some grocery shops and fast food restaurants. The students might not be financially rich, but with their large numbers, the market was rather big. Shops that catered to their daily needs congregated around the campus. Whenever school was out, stalls sprung out around the roads leading out of the campus. Most of them sold snacks. During this period, the students who were liberated from class were attracted like butterflies to honey, swarming to the stalls to eat the snacks. One of the stalls sold baked fruit pie. The stall owner was baking his pie as usual when he heard a female student place her order. "Owner, I want free fruit pies, with marmalade." "All right, please wait a moment, it will be done soon." The voice of the owner, who turned his head to greet his customer, became softer gradually. The reason was simple, the one before his stall was a full armored knight instead of a student. It wasn't as tall as a silhouette knight, but it still towered over the tent. It twisted its body and peeked at the stall entrance, looking at the stunned owner with its tilted head. This awkward atmosphere went on for a while as two similar knights came from behind to scold the one that arrived first. "Hey, 80, why would anyone buy things while piloting that?" Right. Sorry, sir, I must have frightened you." The voice of a young girl came from the heavily armored knight. The owner had not shaken off this ridiculous sight when the armor suddenly opened and a real female student came out of it, shocking him. What is this thing?" Owner, the pie is burnt." The owner flipped the pie in a hurry upon hearing that, but several of them had already been burnt. The girl made an apologetic expression. Sorry, it's all because of me. We will buy that burnt one, then." "No, even though I was surprised, I was still the one who burned it. Please don't mind that." The owner put the fruit jam ordered by the customer into the pie and collected the money at the same time. The female student said her thanks, got back in the armor and left with the other knights. The armor used by the academy recently is incredible. The owner held onto the coins with a shocked expression, seeing the three knights off. It tastes great, marmalade is the best. I prefer lychee jam. I'm fine with anything that is sweet." 80, ERU and CHID held their pie in their hands as they moved the silhouette gear. They looked just like armored knights, but they were walking with a snack in hand. Such a strange scene made the citizens and students give way to them in a panic. They have been using silhouette gear not just in training, but in their everyday lives as well, recently. As was seen earlier, it was a hassle to wear this in your daily lives, but they were not doing this out of convenience. As everyone knows, controlling silhouette gear requires the continuous usage of high-level magic and drains a lot of mana. Magical abilities could only be strengthened with more training. If one wishes to increase their abilities efficiently, they would have to undergo training that was rather difficult. In other words, it was similar to them jogging while using physical boost magic, training their skills in their daily lives. By the way, only ERU is piloting it because it is fun. As they were advancing with noisy steps, a pilot faculty student chased them from behind. He was sent by the boss. Okay, the testing of the prototype machine. Please let us observe. After hearing the message he conveyed, ERU accepted immediately. He even picked the messenger up, not wanting to waste even 1 second. The silhouette knight, which was controlled by ERU using full control, had speed that far exceeded a normal man. ERU, who wanted to rush to the scene immediately, ignored the screams of the student being picked up as he charged toward the campus with incredible speed. The closer they got to the training ground, the more pilot faculty students there were. Unmodified silhouette knights were carrying maintenance parts and materials. The craftsmen and pilots were doing all sorts of work together. When ERU and company reached the training ground, they saw a silhouette knight without outer skin at the center of the stone-paved area. It was the prototype machine that just finished the walking test. It moved just as planned. It's great it didn't explode after taking a single step. What you're worrying about is too simple. Are you really taking it off? If you wear this armor, it would be easier to escape if anything happened, right? ERU put down the student who was on the verge of dying and walked to the boss side after jumping off from the silhouette gear. "Oh, you are here, boy. Let's start then. I'm counting on you." The strand crystal tissue they conducted the test with was made by the boss and the craftsman, completed after many trials and errors. In comparison, the back weapon experiment that would be done next was different. Not just the basic theory, even the design was done by ERU. They got ERU here in order to confirm the next phase. It looks fine, how complete is this thing? The turning and aiming was moving as designed before it was installed. What's next would probably be zeroing the sights and optimizing the setup. That zeroing thing, what is that? Oh, it's adjusting the aim to be as close to the target as possible, I think. Oh, that's important. No matter what, all this would have to wait until the experiment is completed. ERU replied anxiously after alighting from the silhouette gear. The twins remained in their silhouette gears, which obstructed the work going on behind them unwittingly. Okay, let's start from installing the silhouette arms. After receiving orders from the boss, the pilot students holding the silhouette arms approached the prototype machine. A structure never seen on a silhouette night before was attached to the back of the prototype machine. On the place where the shoulder blades of a human should be, a rugged claw that looked similar to the mechanical arms used in manufacturing back on Earth sprouted from there. Its function was similar to that too. This was the main structure of the back weapon, auxiliary arm. The test movement started from the installation of the silhouette arms, and one was used directly without modification. As the auxiliary arm had a hand that could operate silhouette arms, it could be equipped with all sorts of silhouette arms, making it one of the machine's selling point. The student machine standing behind the prototype machine handed the silhouette arms over to the auxiliary arms. Although the hand of the auxiliary arms was simplified, its movement was very smooth as it was made just for holding silhouette arms and nothing else. Each auxiliary arm grabbed a silhouette arms, pointing it upwards. The movement of the auxiliary arm seems fine. Although it required the assistance of another machine to change its silhouette arms, the auxiliary arms were functioning normally. Helby, who was piloting the prototype, felt a slight tremor from her back, and confirmed the image on her holo monitor. Okay, silhouette arms loadout completed, testing deploying function now. Before taking the role of a prototype pilot, she had been involved in the development of the back weapon. She had heard the briefing back then and knew the controls very well. Deploying silhouette arms, displaying reticle. She pulled the lever besides the control stick, which sends instructions to the Magus engine which activates the tissue in the auxiliary arms. The auxiliary arms shook slightly and flexed, lifting the silhouette arms up slowly. The auxiliary arms turned from 90 degrees upright to horizontal, resting on the shoulders of the prototype machine, facing forward. Seeing that the movement was smoother than expected, the maintenance department students were in an uproar. They had seen the structure deploy several times before installation, but seeing it in action while installed was really moving. Inside the cockpit, there was a change on the holo monitor. It usually only displayed the scene outside, but it had a reticle used for aiming now. A combination of a cross and circle, it was a simple display. But taking the fact that there wasn't anything there in the past, this could be considered a major improvement. Aiming, I am going to fire. Helby aimed the reticle on the targets. Observing from outside, it was clear that the movement of the head was linked to the direction the silhouette arms were pointing at. She nervously held her breath and cautiously squeezed the trigger. The silhouette arms which received the command shot out magic bullets immediately. It was firing the standard flame bullets from the silhouette arms. The magic bullets emitting red light flew out and hit the target as if they were sucked in that direction. The practice-use armaments weren't too powerful, that's why the target kept its original shape, but the burn marks of the bullets were obvious. No one expected the experiment to be perfect, but they still hit the target in the end. I thought we would need further adjustment, but we still managed to hit it. Isn't that great? Another hit. The prototype fired more shots. There were some that missed, but the overall accuracy rate was 60%. After finishing, the prototype machine slowly retracted the silhouette arms, which was the deployment movement in reverse. The auxiliary arms folded, keeping the silhouette arms vertically on its back. The testing objective was the deploy and retract functions. It would be enough if it could fire off shots, so the results were better than expected. Oh, so, this is the back weapon. This thing might be more powerful than I imagined. After witnessing the results, even the boss was stroking his beard in praise. The students who were watching the prototype machine in action congratulated each other passionately. It was because the strand crystal tissue, back weapon and fire control system, the light at the end of developing all these new functions, could be seen. When the things they were after bore fruit, that's the happiest moment for technicians. Why is everyone so moved? The twins, who were neither pilots nor craftsmen, couldn't understand why everybody was so touched. They seemed out of place amongst the joyous crowd of students. Hearing the doubts of 80 coming from above his head, ERU replied with a wry smile. Because this is the first step towards a brand new type of silhouette knights. Because it is a path paved by their own hands, that's why it brought so much joy. 80 nimbly crossed her silhouette gear's arms, and lifted her head after agonizing over it for a moment. I don't really understand. But it's great when you succeed. You are right, but 80. ERU hugged his head, unsure of how to explain this to her clearly. As the maintenance students were immersed in the joy of their hard work bearing fruit, there was another group that stared at the prototype machine in another way. Di, what do you think of its performance? It was Edgar and Dietrich, silhouette night pilots. They looked at the result with much thought. Let me think. First, we will be at a disadvantage at long distances. We have to use one arm to control the silhouette arms, but the opponent could hold a shield. More importantly, it could even use a large shield with both hands to fight. That's right, and it could use two silhouette arms without taking risks. To make up for the gap when changing weapons, we would normally use one. It simply doubles the firepower. I don't want to imagine getting into a firefight with it. Not bad, to be able to defeat your adversary more safely. Its functionality is great. It's dependable in a fight against Demon Beast, but we could be facing off against it too. Edgar said, and as Dietrich was about to refute, another voice interjected. That's right, how about I defeat you guys first? The two turned their heads and saw the pilot of the prototype machine, Helby, standing there. The experiment has ended as they were engrossed in their discussion. I won't say that is impossible, but the machine is only half finished, right? That might be so, but I confirmed all the main points during the test. It should be done really soon. The layout had roughly been done, so it should be completed in no time. Helby revealed a resolved smile and her eyes turned sharp. If that is the case, don't you think there are things that needs to be done? For example, letting the strongest knight of the faculty who survived the battle with the behemoth test his might against this new opponent. Edgar's eyes widened. He, Helby and Dietrich were all survivors of the behemoth incident, but each of them had a different view on the matter. You are right, there will be a need to conduct a mock battle anyway, so, you are talking about me. But Helby, aren't you a survivor of that battle, too? Just barely, it was a coincidence that I survived. Because that boy made it in time. Do you feel any regrets about this? Regret over what? I can't thank him enough for that. I should say, I am curious about the machine made by that boy. They watched the prototype machine that was being ferried at the same time. I had taken part from the very start, so I know very well. If I pilot this child with its new power, even I could beat you. How scary. Edgar didn't look afraid at all, just a bit troubled. Helby sighed softly. That's why, after this is done, maybe I can fight the giant monster to the very last moment too. Helby, is that the reason why you took on the job of the test pilot? Nah, I just felt that it's a good thing for silhouette knights to get stronger. We will have an easier time fighting demon beasts after all. Seeing Helby smiling cheerfully as usual, Edgar felt that she was dodging the question. Wash your neck and wait for me, Edgar. I will give you a good beating. Edgar sighed softly, seeing Helby, who was waving her hand. Dietrich patted his shoulder. I envy you, Edgar, the first one to fight the new model. Want to trade places with me? I'm serious. If you reject her challenge, she will hate you, right? And, of course, I will use your battle as a reference. Even though Edgar was a little unwilling, he couldn't hide his curiosity and his determination to win. The two contradictory feelings made Edgar show a complicated expression. After completing the structure of the strand crystal tissue that was the hardest to make, the rest of the work proceeded smoothly. The workers followed the plan and completed the movement test with armor on, and experiments like deploying the back weapons while moving and firing the weapon while moving. They gradually completed each phase. 1 month after the walking test, they finally moved from the prototype stage to the official naming stage. The prototype machine used for technical tests was dubbed Telestyle, named after the machine it was modified from. Telestyle showed itself slowly from the darkness of the workshop. Its appearance was not much different from the other student machines. As there would be further customization in the future, it looked unrefined compared to the other machines. Only the two silhouette arms on its back emphasized its difference from the current models. Telestyle walked towards the training ground, its movement smoother compared to the test back then, but it still felt a bit unnatural. Making its way through the training ground gate, it found another silhouette knight waiting there. The knight, Elcumber, which was covered in white armor, it had a simpler appearance compared to Telestal, equipped with the standard sword and shield. But it was controlled by the pilot recognized as the strongest within the pilot faculty, Edgar. Okay, Helvey seems to be ready. Let's begin then, the mock battle between Telestal and Elcumber. Show us the result of the movement test. The pilot faculty students who came in droves to watch the battle cheered after hearing the opening speech. The mock battle of the new model against the current strongest machine was a highly anticipated fight. Helvey stared at the image of Elcumber displayed on the holo monitor, focusing herself in the pilot seat of Telestal. No matter how powerful the new model Telestal was, she couldn't let her guard down. Edgar and Elcumber fought that behemoth directly after all. Even though he didn't defeat the behemoth, he was still a tough warrior who fought on the front lines until the very last moment. On the other hand, she and her partner, Trandorches, lost. Just like she said, it was just a coincidence that she didn't die. Trandorches and Elcumber were machines made by students, so their performance was about the same. That meant it was the result of the difference in the skills of the pilots. But what about Telestal? It might be an untamed horse that was hard to control, but it had limitless potential. As the test pilot, Helvey had been with it all the way since its engine moaned for the first time, so she knew it very well. More importantly, she looked around the cockpit. The joystick she had gotten used to, the display meter that was revamped but was still familiar. The seat that fit her just felt familiar to her. Speaking of which, Telestal was built from the wreckage of the Behemoth incident and modified by students. This machine was constructed from the base of her half-destroyed machine, Trandorches. Naturally, there were structural differences between the two machines and less than 20% of the original parts were left. Even so, this machine was still the partner she knew for so long. We can fight together again, all right, we are going, Telestal. She stepped on the pedal hard and shouted the name of her partner that was bestowed with new life. The machine responded energetically, leading her back to the battlefield. Volume 2, Chapter 12. Let's have a mock duel. On the training ground of the Lahila Pilot Academy, two giants faced each other with swords in hand. The iron armor reflected a dull gleam and the sound from the friction of the crystal tissue reverberated in the entire field. What follows next would be a mock duel, which is part of training and testing. But for the two pilots riding in the strongest weapon of humanity, this was definitely a battle. The atmosphere wasn't relaxing at all, as the pilots are burning with fighting spirit in the gradually rising tension. Okay, are you ready? We will be having a duel next. Both of you have to adhere to the rules of a mock duel. Bo. Ready. Begin. With the cue of the referee's command, the two iron giants charged out with a roar. Basically, a battle between silhouette knights starts with firing off silhouette arms. When they close the gap, they would switch to melee weapons. Because the silhouette arms were dependent on the emblem graft engraved on them, they were structurally weak and would be destroyed easily in melee combat, depriving the pilot of the means to attack. Edgar had seen Telestal's back weapon in action. Using two silhouette arms at the same time and attacking from a distance was a big threat. That was why Edgar wanted to do away with the long-distance battle and moved into a melee battle immediately. But contrary to his expectation, Telestal moved forward immediately after the battle started, gradually closing the distance. What is she thinking? Doesn't she want to use the advantage of a ranged attack? But that suits me just fine. Elcumber took a strong step forward, wanting to give it a head start on the slash. But as he was swinging his sword, Edgar realized he misjudged the functionality of the back weapon. As the two machines were about to collide, Telestal suddenly deployed the silhouette arms onto its shoulders. Helvey, who was looking at the reticle displaying before her in the cockpit, smiled as her plan worked. I will use this in place of a greeting. The ability to shoot magic rounds even at close distance, the real value of the back weapon. The dual silhouette arms on Telestal's back fired off simultaneously. Even the tough Elcumber couldn't evade the attack at such a close distance. Its shield blocked one of the shots, the other hit the right shoulder which wasn't covered by the shield. The training shot wasn't strong enough to blow the right arm off, but Elcumber still lost its balance and its advantage in pressing the attack. That's not all. Telestal swung its blade as it retracted its silhouette arms. Using the momentum, it attacked the unbalanced adversary. The movements were rough, but it was more terrifying than a half-assed attack. Edgar didn't resist the falling motion. He spun to the right and pushed out the shield on its left arm to block Telestal's blow. Elcumber managed to defend the attack, but was almost sent flying as it staggered backwards. Elcumber was in such an awkward position because it was unbalanced, and also because of the power behind Telestyle's strike. Quote exclamation mark. What terrifying strength, so this is the power of the strand crystal tissue. Edgar groaned and leaped backwards to pull away. The back weapon could attack from unexpected angles, and the strand crystal tissue displayed overwhelming strength. Edgar repositioned himself as he threw away all the known tactics of dueling. Really, I am getting used to abandoning common sense, how unpleasant. The holo monitor showed that Telestyle had started to advance, coming after Elcumber. It had given up the idea of a surprise attack, deploying its silhouette arms onto its shoulders as it forged ahead. But I won't back down so easily. Simple back and forth movement will just make Elcumber the target of magic shots. Elcumber started moving sidewards, escaping out of Telestyle's attack range. A heated battle started from the very beginning, which pumped up the audience in the training ground. Cheers erupted every time the Iron Giants crossed swords. Unlike the audience immersed in the heat of the battle, the maintenance students analyzed the battle in low voices. As expected of Edgar, most pilots would have fallen from the first attack. Helby Senpai is piloting really smoothly. Being the test pilot wasn't just for show. The ones conversing were ERU and the boss. For these two, Telestyle moving in a situation close to actual battle was as valuable as gold. They observed carefully, analyzing their every move. The two machines clashed right in their field of vision. They thought the machines would struggle for quite a while with swords, but Telestyle had an advantage in power, pushing Elcumber's sword back, but Elcumber wasn't a pushover either, pulling away from Telestyle as if he had expected it, not letting Telestyle gain the upper hand. Helby seems to be relying heavily on the power advantage. The difference in power output is significant after all. I think this is the best way to gain the upper hand. To be honest, the controls have not been optimized yet, so she will lose if she relies on delicate controls to fight. The boss accepted Aru's commentary. Telestyle had overwhelming energy and excellent explosive power. But as the control system had not been calibrated perfectly, it couldn't perform delicate movements, and could only attack with crude steps. Edgar could see this and didn't take the hit head-on. Even so, Telestyle, who could attack with the sword and back weapon simultaneously, had the upper hand. How dangerous. I have to stop the silhouette arms, it's too powerful. Edgar, who was trapped, analyzed the situation calmly. His opponent, Helby, had grasped the feature of Telestyle and used the most effective ways to attack, to cover its weakness. Even though Edgar had noticed that the movement of Telestyle wasn't polished, but he couldn't take advantage of it. If this was a fight between normal silhouette knights, Edgar would be about to lure the opponent to attack and counter. But it's another matter when battling Telestyle. The most crucial factor was the back weapon, resulting in the difference in means of attack. The opponent could attack and restrain Edgar's movement with unexpected timed attacks. He had less ways to attack, and will lose in terms of strength in a wrestle. It had nothing to do with skill, that's how big the difference in machine performance was. The students watching knew that Elcumber didn't mess up or was giving a handicap. Hence, even though its movement was still crude, the new model that was overwhelming the strongest man in the faculty brought the excitement of the crowd to the boiling point. Elcumber was gradually forced into a corner. If he doesn't take a gamble and take out the back weapon, Edgar will definitely lose. I don't like gambling, but it would be pointless if I lose without trying anything. Seeing Elcumber in her holo monitor stopping, Helby mumbled. Quote. He is getting impatient. Edgar wants to bet everything on the next attack. Helby knew her skills were not at his level, so she had to fight by relying on the performance of the machine. It was easy for Helby to guess Edgar's objective. He can't make up for the power output of the strand crystal tissue, he is probably aiming for the back weapon. If Edgar takes the back weapon out, no matter how vast the gap in the power output was, he had a chance to aim for the weak point with precision and turn the situation around with his skills. Because both pilots knew this, the main objective of the upcoming scrimmage was decided. The two machines pointed their swords at each other and stopped moving. The silence after the heated exchange was like a tightened string, and the tension grew with it. Before they realized, the audience had turned quiet, waiting for the end of the battle with bated breath. The sharp sound of intake of air was suddenly heard. It was Elcumber revving the ether reactor at full power. That sound was akin to the battle cry of the Silhouette Knights, and the tense situation changed. Elcumber charged. Out of all his choices, Edgar chose a direct assault. The Iron Knight dashed with heavy steps which almost shattered the stone-paved ground. Going head-on in such a situation, that's just like you. Good, I will do my best too. No matter how wide the power difference was, if its momentum doesn't match her opponent, Telestyle won't be able to take the hit. That's why Helvey ordered Telestyle to advance too. The scene of both machines clashing with a charge was reminiscent of the opening of the battle. Telestyle used the attack which was to her advantage, the two silhouette arms on her shoulders fired at Elcumber. Elcumber used its shield to defend while swinging its sword to deflect the shot. The sword mastery capable of deflecting magic shots was commendable, but swinging his sword right before clashing with the enemy meant giving up the chance to attack. Even the audience could tell. Telestyle closed in on Elcumber at this moment and was about to give a mighty blow. Everyone, including Helvey, thought that this ending was a letdown when Edgar, who took the initiative to attack, is being cut down like that. Of course, Edgar didn't swing his sword because of carelessness. He had decided to use the sword for defense right from the start. Gripping the crucial shield, it moved its fist near its shoulder to secure its hold. Elcumber lowered its posture and threw the left side of its body forward. What? Shield bash. He wants to clash head-on. Helvey sensed Elcumber's intention at the last moment and kept her sword. She would be at a disadvantage if she used her sword against Elcumber's shield. Edgar's plan was simple. Even if his means of attack and pure power output loses to his adversary, Elcumber still had an advantage over his opponent, which is weight. He used speed to make up for the difference in power and charged at Telestyle like a bullet. Piloting skills aside, Telestyle had the advantage in terms of strength. Helvey had absolute confidence in this and decided to take the attack head-on. When she discovered Edgar's motives, it was too late for Telestyle to dodge. She had already started to accelerate, and had to take the same actions. Telestyle raised its shield and the two silhouette knights collided shortly after. At that moment, the loud bang of the collision reverberated through the entire training ground. The shields taking the full brunt of the impact deformed, splitting the two machines to the side on offense and defense. Helvey, who hesitated because of the unexpected attack, and Edgar, who was aiming to clash from the very beginning, his objective was to enter the melee range, that's why he threw himself into this attack. Elcumber didn't forego the chance it gained after its heavy sacrifice, lifting its right arm which was still mobile, and stabbing into the silhouette arms on Telestyle's shoulders. You are good. But I won't fall for that again. Elcumber's left arm was heavily damaged and couldn't move freely. But surprisingly, Telestyle's left arm was still working after that collision. The strand crystal tissue was damaged, but still showed its strength, pushing Elcumber easily. What? Not just the power, even the toughness was enhanced. But I can't miss this opportunity. Just a bit more. Telestyle. Elcumber's quick attack went over its opponent's shoulder, destroying the silhouette arms. But that's the limit of his all-out counterattack. Telestyle's seemingly endless strength pressed back at Elcumber, pushing Elcumber, who was in an unstable position due to the previous attack, staggering backwards. Ugh, did I push it too much? I got this. Edgar. Telestyle charged at Elcumber mightily. The off-balanced Elcumber couldn't evade the attack, its wounded left hand was unable to lift its shield. Telestyle raised its sword high, and was about to hack at the helpless Elcumber. But the sword didn't fall, and Telestyle knelt onto the ground. It was hard to describe the atmosphere in the training ground. Maybe dumbfounded and stunned would be appropriate. Why did Telestyle, which was about to deliver the final blow, kneel down? Just by looking at the stunned reaction of Elcumber, it was easy to tell this wasn't the result of Elcumber's timely counterattack. No one expected this result just as the match was about to be decided at the very climax. No one knew how to react to this finale, and the entire training ground was shrouded in silence. The mana had been exhausted. The shout of ERU, who figured it out, echoed through the silent training ground. Well then, time for the maintenance department's first after-action review. ERU announced the start of the meeting with a serious expression. Inside the workshop, ERU, the boss and their merry friends were all gathered here. Everyone had an awkward expression. Even ERU, who always does as he pleased, looked distracted. He hesitated a moment and peeked at the reason of the awkwardness. What he saw was Helvey, who was squatting gloomily in a corner of the workshop. The kanji, awkward, could almost be seen coming out of her body. It wasn't her fault, but ending it so abruptly after such a stellar performance, she would rather be defeated in battle. It's no wonder she was sulking. It was within their expectations for the prototype to have flaws, but it picked an awkward time to act up. That's how one would frankly describe the feelings of the audience. No, the problem only surfaced because of their fierce fight before the conclusion of the battle. But these facts couldn't console Helvey. Edgar senpai, could you please cheer Helvey senpai up? Hey, why me? Ugh, I will do my best. ERU, who couldn't stand it any longer, forcefully pushed Edgar to Helvey's side. After seeing him go with a selfless expression, ERU turned his head back refreshingly. Phew, that should do. Let's think about tackling the new problem that surfaced. Don't die, Edgar. Well, the problem is obvious. The greater the output, the bigger the consumption rate. It's very logical. Everyone looked at Telestal, which was placed on the maintenance platform, and thought hard. Using strand crystal tissue to increase the power output led to a higher mana usage rate, depleting the mana reserves at a faster pace. With the silhouette arms being easier to use, the mana consumption rate was higher than expected. On the other hand, the amount of crystal tissue didn't rise by much after implementing the strand crystal tissue method, so the mana reserves only increased slightly. This resulted in the flaw of shorter operational time for Telestal. The timing of this problem was bad, but it made sense when you think about it. Considering all these factors, the operational time is about half of a normal machine. This is very bad, right? The worst. It could be considered a fatal flaw. The point of emphasis for this modification was the increase in power output, installing silhouette arms and aiming functions and such. Anyway, they were all things that consume mana, so the imbalance of the modification rose to the surface. After years of tweaking, the silhouette knights were designed to store as much mana as possible, but it also meant the design couldn't be changed easily. That might be so, but sitting here sighing wouldn't help either. In order to not let Helvey's honorable sacrifice go to waste, they had to think of something to overcome that flaw. The main point is that the mana supply couldn't keep up with the consumption rate, but it's difficult to modify the source, the ether reactor. Or rather, it's impossible. Even ERU couldn't do anything about the mysterious reactor. His words made the students around him relax secretly. If ERU could customize that too, they would have all fallen over in shock. What about lowering the output? But even so, it wouldn't change the fact that the structure burns a lot of mana, and lowering the output would be putting the horse before the cart. Another way would be increasing the mana storage capacity. How is the capacity increased? Simply put, by increasing the amount of crystal tissue. Can't we do that then? If we increase the crystal tissue, the consumption rate would increase too. There would be no end to this. The strand crystal tissue has an intangible flaw. The amount of tissue didn't increase much, that's why the power output and capacity is unbalanced. This serious issue gave everyone a headache. This wasn't something that could be resolved easily. But hope came from an unexpected source. How about using your idea? As everyone was silent in thought, 80, who didn't say anything, spoke up. Hearing 80, who was usually quiet during conference, voice her opinion, ERU asked. My idea. That's right, it's fine even if the appearance is not human. We can increase the tissues, but we don't need to stick with the human form, right? It's fine, even if it's not human, I get it. Correct, you are correct. For her, this was just repeating something ERU said. But the one who said it was surprised, with his eyes widening, and he slowly squinted his eyes. Ugh, you are correct, but for 80 to enlighten me, I can't believe it. How mean? Why? The boss ignored the raging 80 and ERU, who was being chased. 80's comment reminded the boss too, and they came to the same conclusion. Being fine even if it's not in the shape of a human, doesn't mean you had to use a shape that was inhuman. That's it. Increasing the crystal tissue doesn't mean it has to move. By connecting the silver nerves to it, and pushing it into excess space, it would be fine if we could increase the mass of the crystal tissue. K. I said, I am sorry. Ka. Sorry, I apologize, alright. Boss, we should maximize the space usage, so we shouldn't use fiber form but sheets. I think it would be best to employ the form of a sheet. Hearing Aru's proposal, the boss lifted his head. Alright, it's decided. Next would be negotiating with the alchemist faculty and asking for their help. I will go ahead and greet them, leave it to me. After finding a solution to the critical issue, the air around the maintenance department relaxed. ERU was cracking his head, thinking of ways to soothe the peaked 80. The iron giant made a squeaking sound as it stood up. It was 10 meters tall, more than 5 times the height of the humans in the vicinity. The rough armor maintained its original metallic shine, reflecting a dull glow from the sunlight. The sound of its armor clanking grew louder as it moved. The giant moved its body to check its condition, and nodded at the person at its feet. When it had confirmed all the people in the vicinity had left, it started to move according to the instruction of the people around it. The crystal tissue covering the arms of the giant started to contract from the effects of mana. Its body tensed and lifted both arms with emphasis and shot its elbows to the side. It stretches its arms, shoulders and chest muscles, with both feet planted firmly on the ground, front double bicep pose. Next, it took a light step forward, and put down its arms. Its fists meeting before its abdomen. Leaning slightly forward, it used all its might to pump its arm and chest muscle, the position that brings out the best of power and beauty, the most muscular pose. The Iron Giant kept on changing its pose. What the hell is this? No, what experiment is this? According to the explanation, it seems to be testing for crystal tissue parts that aren't used much. Who set such an agenda? Looking at the experiment devised by a certain silvered-hair youth in the prototype that was concentrating on doing all sort of poses, Edgar complained with a dumb look. Helvey was the one who answered him. Well, it's fine if it is a proper experiment, eh? Is it fine? It's fine, right? Is that so? Forget about that. Is the testing for Unit 2 going well? Yes. The pilot just changed shifts, but it is progressing smoothly. Before Edgar was another telestyle named as Unit 2, which was doing another set of tests. Other than these two machines with exposed tissues, other telestyle could be seen doing all sorts of movement tests. The experiment ended with the great flaw of reduced operational time a few days ago, but new developments had started because of that mock battle. The flaw aside, because its discovery was too dramatic, it made everyone wonder if there were other critical flaws. That's why experiments with repeated and large movements were set to filter out any more problems. Everyone agreed to the additional testing, but it couldn't be done with just one telestyle, so they created more machines of similar models to deal with that. To do this, the maintenance team worked non-stop after the mock battle, and some were worried about the students being overworked to death. In the end, they created 5 telestyle. They weren't piloted by a handful of night runners, but by a team working in shifts to complete the list of experiments. Thanks to this, no major defects were discovered. They also made improvements during this time period, steadily improving the level to its perfection. Edgar and Helvey just happened to be both on break, and were chatting about how to adjust to the controls. Recently, they had been talking about the new models every now and then. We need to discuss this part with Ernesty, too. That's right, I haven't seen him around lately. Stopping his sentence halfway, Edgar remembered because of the name he brought up. They didn't see ERU recently, which made Helvey troubled. That boy should be watching the experiments here, you can't even drag him away. What happened? Did he run into some troubles? Edgar's expression stiffened slightly and he looked up at the clear sky. I'm not usually this free. Really? So, what's so special about today? Adie was hugging ERU and poked her head out from behind. ERU dodged her gaze with wandering eyes. Before them were the blue silhouette armor and many other spare parts. When Edgar brought up ERU in campus, ERU and his friends were gathered at the Tomoman workshop. The development of telestyle was proceeding well with the efforts of the high schoolers. With nothing major requiring his assistance, ERU, who was bored, immersed himself in the development of equipment for silhouette gear. That's right, we are busy, there are tons of things we need to test. You are that free, but you only play with Batson. You only train with CHID as an opponent and you don't go out much, how boring. This equipment was designed by ERU and made by Batson. The miniature armor was different from the Silhouette Knights. The challenge of making equipment for silhouette gear spurred their desire for research. The passion of these two even made Adie, who was given the cold shoulder, kick up a fuss. With ERU and Adie, who were playing casually at one side, Batson deftly opened the armor of the silhouette gear to install the internal parts while CHID watched. I'm fine with it though. But you had made so many. What is that? This is called wire anchor. Ask ERU for a detailed explanation. As for its uses, see for yourself. Although they made about 10 first-generation silhouette gears, it wasn't utilized because of the difficulty in the controls. It had become ERU and the others' toy training tool. Only Edgar or Dietrich would use them for training. With Aru's permission, they would visit every now and then. Oh yeah, Edgar-senpai was complaining a few days ago, saying it was harder to pilot after changing the crystal tissue into the strand type. Of course, the strand crystal tissue had moved on to practical applications thanks to telestyle. It had greater strength, but the controls were also more difficult. Even Edgar had to give up on that. Anyway, it's too pitiful to keep calling them Silhouette Gear. It's about time for an official name, right? How about Lucy Kimiko Aki Eri Shiori Rinya Yoshiho Aino Tamika Chido Sane Mikiko Aikika? Too long. Pick something shorter. Then, use the short version, Motorbeat. Hey, the short version has nothing to do with the name you came up with earlier. Motorbeat, nice to meet you. After greeting his own Motorbeat, Chid's face stiffened. Oh no, he might have been infected by ERU. He facepalmed himself and shook his head. Well, since the name has been decided, time to show off the new equipment. Stop sulking, 80, and help, alright. ERU finally soothed 80 and got on the blue Motorbeat made to his size. He walked towards the yard of the workshop and pointed the arm of Motorbeat at the wall that was higher than the building, instead of the target boards. Watch carefully, wire anchor, fire. The sound of a shot followed the cheerful shout. An arrow-shaped projectile flew out from the wrist. Wires were attached to the end of the arrow, which kept coming out from the wrist. The arrow defied gravity and went at full speed towards the top of the workshop, and went over the roof at a sharp corner. The internal mechanism activated, turning the arrow into the shape of an anchor. ERU pulled on the wire to check if the anchor was secure. It's stable. Next would be take off. The gears inside Motorbeat's arm made churning noises. Motorbeat was pulled by the wire that was secured and he started running towards the wall and leaped. After landing on the wall, it took several steps and ran up to the roof. After twisting in the air, the Motorbeat used air suspension magic to cushion its landing, stopping on the rooftop gently. ERU commanded the Motorbeat to stand up slowly, focusing his script and mana on the arrow that was still embedded in the roof. The wire attached to the anchor contained silver nerves, and the script was sent to the crystal tissue installed in the anchor. The deployed anchor changed its shape, returning into its arrow form, and was stored in its arm. The arrow head was propelled by the crystal tissue built into it, using aero thrust intermittently to move. By controlling the direction of the propulsion, it could even change its flight path to a certain degree. Amazing gear. No, Motorbeat got up onto the roof in no time. 80 and the others, who saw the entire process, lifted their heads and watched. Even with their physical boost spell, climbing to the top of buildings while wearing armor was a tedious task. And ERU managed to do that while wearing Motorbeat, which was even bigger. It was something that amazed them. Oh, it went well this time, ERU. I had fallen so many times before. Let's try the next one. Ah, so it will fail sometimes, eh? So you want to bring that here. ERU jumped off the roof. Even Motorbeat would be in trouble if it fell from such a height. It decelerated using air compression on the way down, and used air suspension to absorb the impact, kicking up a cloud of dust. Once it landed, CHID and 80 started dragging something out of the workshop. They were holding different items. CHID was holding a giant bow built mainly from wood and reinforced with steel. Behind the bow was a mechanism with gears. CHID looked at the thing he brought out and said, "Hey, this crossbow is too big. Is this a siege weapon?" "You are right. To be precise, it is the mini version of a ballista." As ERU had described, that bow was large even in the hands of the Motorbeat. It would be too heavy to operate without the Motorbeat. Why would you want something this big? Ah, I see. You want to use the Motorbeat to operate the ballista. Not only that, 80. Did you bring the magazine? Please put it in. Inside the cart pushed over by 80 were several box-like items known as magazines. It was as thick enough for a man's torso, and would protrude out even when held by a Motorbeat. Simply put, this uses strand crystal tissue on the bowstring and loading mechanism, a weapon known as mobile ballista. By controlling the crystal tissue, you can shoot out the bolts freely. I see. What about this magazine? There are bolts in there and they would move whenever the bowstring was retracted, reloading after shooting out one bolt. As for the next part, it would be quicker to just show you. CHID followed Aru's instructions, inserting the magazine into the front and center part of the ballista. The catch clicked, securing the magazine in place. After confirming that the magazine has been secured, 80 started transmitting script and mana to the ballista. The strand crystal tissue stretched to the limit, making the unique sound of crystal tissue being pulled. The gear connected to the pulling motion loaded a bolt onto the grove of the ballista. The next control was special. Since the crystal tissue is the bowstring, there wasn't any mechanism like a trigger. CHID could control the crystal tissue directly in order to fire the bolts. CHID commanded the crystal tissue that had been stretched to the limit to retract. The bolt flew out with a mighty sound. As CHID was aiming from a close distance, the arrow pierced the wooden target dead on. This bolt was shorter and thicker when compared to its bow. It might be relatively short, but since it was fired from a mini ballista, it was closer to a spear with fletching rather than an arrow. Utilizing the power of the strand crystal tissue to its limit, while the bolts fired from the ballista couldn't match mainstream weapons, they were powerful enough. The result was the bolt piercing the wooden target and pulverizing part of it. I don't think we should fire this inside the city. It's fine, there is a really thick earth wall behind the range. Unless you use overt magic and focus at one point, you won't be able to break through it. ERU and Batson ignored CHID, who froze in place after firing it and chatted idly. 80, who was hugging a magazine, was looking at the bolt that demolished part of the target excitedly. Oh right, by using the crystal tissue, you can fire repeatedly. Depending on proficiency, you can fire a shot every 5 seconds. A magazine has 10 bolts, so it could be depleted in a minute. Phew. Is that so? Let me try. CHID raised the ballista timidly. Reading out to calm his mind, he started firing continuously. The rhythm of the churning and the arrows flying through the air continued for a moment. The bolts hit the target one after another. The target fell apart after the 5th shot, so he shot the remaining bolts onto the wall. A portable siege weapon that can be fired repeatedly, how frightening. But it is portable after all, though it is heavy and hard to control. It's put together with spare parts and has low accuracy, so it needs numbers to cover for its lack of precision. What do you want to do with this, ERU? Don't you think challenging the limits and creating new things is something amazing? You didn't think about how to utilize this at all. Chid's questions made ERU avert his gaze and smile nonchalantly. And so, the silhouette gear slowly turned into a terrifying weapon without anyone realizing it. The movement tests of the prototype were about to finish when the alchemist faculty sent word that the ordered goods had been completed. Because the crystal tissue was in the form of a sheet, it was dubbed sheet crystal tissue. The new material was sent to the workshop one by one. Past research on crystal tissue focused on how to effectively increase output from the contraction of the tissue. Mana storage was only seen as a secondary function. But with the development of the sheet crystal tissue as a catalyst, the alchemist had also started researching crystal tissue that are used primarily to store mana. Doing the research from a different angle renewed their motivation. They would definitely come up with a crystal tissue that has large mana capacity sooner or later. As for the prototypes that went through a long series of tests, the results showed that there were no major defects except for the shortened operation period. The sheet crystal tissue became the last piece in the puzzle to make up for its flaw. In order to finish the project, the craftsmen started the modification project to increase the mana capacity of the silhouette knight. We are full of drive, but this isn't working. Their original plan was to install the sheet crystal tissue into the space inside the armor. But when they started researching it, they found the space to be smaller than expected. To avoid interfering with the crystal tissue used for movement, they couldn't stuff the tissue into any space haphazardly. And so, they removed all the armor, covered the machine with a layer of sheet crystal tissue, and replaced the armor, using multiple layers. This was done in order to not affect the tissues responsible for movement. Increasing the mass of the tissue meant increasing the mana storage. By extending the operation time, it would be a success. But the results weren't as optimistic. The guys moaned at the sight of telestyle. How fat, how lame. Even if they put their sense of aesthetics aside, the multiple layer method posed many problems. It drastically increased the machine weight and lowered mobility. Even the power of the strand crystal tissue couldn't compensate for that. The thick armor interfered with movement, and the melee combat ability. The crystal tissue layer could increase defense as a secondary armor, but with the disadvantages outweighing its benefits, they rejected this method. Too heavy. Let's try to slim him down. The next thing they thought of was to limit the parts with multiple layers. Considering its detrimental effect on melee combat, only the armor that didn't affect the movements of the joints were installed with multiple layers. This method won't increase the weight by much, but the crucial mana reserves won't improve much either. But the method of adding multiple layers was preserved, and was named capacity frame. This is the limit of adding crystal tissue into the inside. If we increase it any more, it would affect the armor. The only solution left was to install the sheet crystal tissue on the outside. In order to avoid the problem with weight, they didn't even install armor, covering it with cloth and wires, which was just barely better than exposing it. After researching where humans could store extra weight, they decided on the back or the waist, with the back being the best fit. They thought so, too, but it created another problem. Really, what a stubborn machine. Be more considerate. They removed the back weapon to install the crystal tissue, but the result of a heavy mass on the back was shifting the center of gravity backwards, affecting melee fighting ability and control. Silhouette knights were built to fight. It would be bad if the pilots couldn't control it properly. And removing the back weapon would invalidate the existence of the new model. They had no choice but to explore other methods. What the hell do we have to do? Let's do all we can and test everything out. In the end, they decided to use the capacity frame and distributed the sheet crystal tissue on the outside. They added tissue that won't affect the balance onto the back, and installed pockets of crystal tissue on the waist, too. They had to make adjustments to the equipment on the waist and were able to increase the mana capacity. They improved on its weak points, but there were still some problems with the operation period that remained. In the end, the Silhouette craftsmen gave up on solving all the problems at this current stage. With their technology, they needed heavy crystal tissues in order to ensure a sufficient supply of mana. Everyone agreed that they should wait for the alchemist to develop a new type of crystal tissue with large mana capacity, solving the problem at its roots. The modified telestyles were lined up in the workshop in standby mode. There were 5 of them with capacity frames, and had a more solid appearance compared to its earlier days. On its back and waist were pockets of sheet crystal tissue. It didn't look like a mechanical customization, giving it a feeling of being more human. That's it. It's not perfect, but that's the best we can manage. It's complete. The feeling of it being a rushed job couldn't be waved off, but the craftsmen decided to change their thinking. The modification of the Telestyle series was enough to cover its critical flaw, the highest level of completion they could hope for at the current stage. It wasn't perfect, but these 5 machines still had the potential of being more powerful than the old Silhouette Knights, leading the way to a new generation of Silhouette Knights. Seeing them lined up like this, the maintenance department and the pilots finally saw the completion of an entire phase. Everyone had different reaction when they saw the Telestyle series. Some were immersed in a sense of accomplishment, some were glad to be free from work, and some were already thinking about ways to improve the models. But all of them had the same expression of making it through a tough challenge, basking in the pride and glory. The boss had the same expression and turned to look at everyone, showing his teeth in a brilliant smile. Good work, everyone. You have worked too hard. We still have many problems to tackle, but let's celebrate the completion of these fellows. After finishing such a big project, I don't need to tell you what we need to do next, right? Everyone lifted their hands and acknowledged the boss loudly. They all came to a consensus. The entire pilot faculty held an overnight celebration party. That scene could only be described this way: when the sky was dim and the surroundings enveloped in darkness, the celebration party morphed into the demon realm. By the way, Fremavira law dictates that only adults 15 years old could drink alcohol. ERU and his friends didn't take part, and the party was exclusive to the entire pilot faculty. In the raving atmosphere, with several people literally flying into the air, one figure left silently. He blended into the noisy atmosphere and kept a low profile, leaving the celebration party, which was a demon realm, in hasty steps and returned to his room in the dormitory. The sky was dark, a light was lit in a room in the silent dormitory. After returning to the room, he shook his giddy head, drinking water to wash away the alcohol. His roommate was probably still drinking in the workshop. He relaxed and took out a stack of paper from the drawer of his table. There was an organized report on it, stating technology related to Silhouette Knights, including the prototype machine and strand crystal tissue. He added details of the sheet crystal tissue and capacitive frame onto it. It wasn't exhaustive, but it was enough for others to understand the gist of the prototype. As he felt his dizziness fade away, he felt satisfied with the content he wrote, and placed it back into the drawer. Volume 2, Chapter 13: What to do with the prototype machine. Noticing that the shadow blocking the sun was beside his hand, ERU raised his head and looked at the sky outside his window. The clouds turning from white to grey slowly eroded the clear blue sky. He looked at the notebook before him, relaxing his stiff shoulders and overworked brain. His gaze turned to the skyline, watching the heavy grey clouds. The thin clouds would probably turn black soon. As ERU was thinking mindlessly about that. Ernesty, don't look around during class. The voice pulled ERU, who was losing his focus, back. ERU apologized obediently to the teacher, who had a stiff expression and looked back at the blackboard. The teacher continued his lesson, and with the sound of chalk writing on the blackboard, the voice explaining the history of Fremavara could be heard. His classmates glanced at him curiously, before turning their attention back to the content written on the blackboard. That was close. I shouldn't relax no matter how tired I am. Let's review my work. ERU looked at the notebook in his hand once again. It was a pity, but as Aru's classmates were listening to the lecture seriously, he was writing things that were unrelated to the lesson into his notebook. Specifically speaking, it had the sketches of strange silhouette knights, with legends marked at the side. Telestyle is completed, which means the foundation has been laid. With this foundation, I have to prepare a surprise that will amaze the king. I have to start with the designs. Thinking about matters that were obviously unrelated to class, looking at the blackboard from time to time while writing down notes, ERU appeared no different than usual. A normal 12-year-old wouldn't have covered that up so perfectly. This was the result of experience in a negative manner. No one suspected his attitude towards lessons, and the class carried on smoothly. No, there were some who had noticed. The wire anchor seems fun. I will ask them to install it for me next time. He did say the controls were a hassle, but there must be a way. I will bring ERU to walk around and eat snacks, I've decided. All work and no play will make ERU a dull boy. The two of them got the attitude one should have in class wrong, but it wasn't a big issue. By the way, although they are like this during lessons, they all had good grades for lessons outside of magic and physical training. The shadows from the clouds gradually became darker. The boss, who was taking a break under the shelter of the workshop, looked at the sky and let out an irritated moan. Sigh, it's gonna rain. Shouldn't we be glad that it didn't rain during the testing for Telestyle? Edgar, who was sitting beside the table, answered absent-mindedly. Dietrich, who was sitting at the same table, looked at his hand seriously, while Helvey watched the two of them with a smile. It's troublesome when it rains. There will be some endurance tests coming up soon. A pair, I'm going to win soon. As she spoke, Helvey placed the card she picked and a card in her hand onto the table. There was a reason why they were playing cards. The students from the pilot faculty had hung on until the celebration party, but after that most of the craftsmen collapsed from exhaustion and most of them took leave. The newly finished machines could not be activated without the maintenance staff, so the pilots had to kill time this way. The dwarf, who was tough amongst the craftsmen, the boss, was still lively, but he couldn't do much by himself. The 5 Telestyle are officially completed, but from the looks of things, I don't know when the rest of the repairs will be done. There will be progress in the next few days. Right now, we are on vacation. The boss answered Edgar ambiguously. Helvey drew a card and discarded the last card in her hand, leaving Edgar and Dietrich to duke it out. Oh, yeah. Boss, my guile is still in pieces, right? Oh, that's correct. Come again when we are open for business. Dietrich suddenly thought of this question, and the boss gave a casual reply. Since the craftsmen were short-handed, it couldn't be helped. Dietrich, who lost to Edgar, leaned onto the table weakly. Anyway, please help the winners buy some snacks. Yup, a cheap pie would do. I want to eat meat, so buy something with that. Well, okay. Wait, hey boss, you didn't take part, right? Don't be so petty, just treat it as a gesture of thanking me for all the times I took care of you. Dietrich's face alternated between green and white before resigning himself, dragging heavy footsteps towards the cafeteria. The three of them looked on with the ease of victors, seeing him off. When that gloomy back disappeared from view, the boss thought of something. It's not worthy of compliments, but that fellow is easier to get along with now. Before this, he would keep yammering whenever he loses, and would definitely play cards with me. The boss smiled wryly. The smile under his beard was hard to see as usual. Dietrich's neurotic and hard-to-please personality was famous among the maintenance department and the pilots. He was capable, but not someone easy to get along with. They had the chance to work with him often, so they had noticed that Dietrich had become rather low-profile. He changed after the Behemoth incident. Dietrich has mostly changed for the better. By the way, he was the one most passionate about the Telestyle experiments, right? Helvey recalled something related, too. Helvey, who took on the role of test pilot from the very start, had the most experience, followed by Dietrich, who started piloting Telestyle after that. Edgar nodded with a surprised expression. That's right, maybe, it was because of Ernest D. Die was the only one who saw him pilot during that incident. Edgar answered Helvey with a stern face. Edgar's expression displayed his passion and commitment as a pilot. It might be a coincidence. It might just be by chance, but his friend had the opportunity to witness the skills capable of fighting against a division-level demon beast, and it made him jealous, and his friend's ability has obviously risen to a new level, which impressed Edgar. Edgar was a just person, although he might be too stubborn about it at times. Helvey, who knew him for quite some time, understood that Edgar would work harder when he sees the people around him put in so much effort. That boy, ha! He is small and agile. If you don't work hard, he will leave you in the dust. The eyes under the slightly curled short hair squinted cheerfully, teasing Edgar. Edgar didn't know how to respond and reverted back to his nonchalant smile. I won't be left behind so easily. Oh, now that you mentioned it, I have something to discuss with the silver boy. The boss suddenly clapped, and noticed the question on the faces of the other two. Well, making a new model is all good, but I am thinking about what to do next. Repairing the rest of the machines on campus. I have permission from the dean, so there's no hurry, but we can't just abandon the new models after reaching this stage. The boss mumbled, his eyes looking at the evening sun. Edgar and Helvey gasped and looked at each other. With the bell ringing to signal the end of the lessons, stalls started appearing around LightNovel Pilot Academy. In no time, the students who were dashing out after school could be seen. Hey, little miss, not bringing your armor along this time? Yes, we will be eating while walking like this today. Give me 3 pies. All right, what fillings do you want? Let me think. The last bit of blue was gone from the sky, which made the people watching it feel uneasy. ERU compared 80, who was ordering her snacks with the stall owner cheerfully, with the weather. He thought it would be better if the weather had the same mood as 80. Don't think about it too much, it will rain if you drag it for too long. You are right, but how should I put this? I feel that if we don't accompany 80 more today, our relationship would turn bad. Quote. Oh. Hey, let's worry about that after it rains. 80 turned around at this time with a smile on her face, and hot pies in her hands. Would it rain first, or would she have shopped until she was satisfied? ERU was wondering about trivial things. After this, they visited a lot of stalls, and when they were almost full, they made a trip to the workshop. There was no special reason for this, they would just go there to see the strange sights from time to time. Quote. What are you doing? Hey, as you see, we are playing Kuklin. David is a formidable opponent. Under the shelter of the workshop, the dean of LightNovel Pilot Academy was playing a board game similar to chess on Earth with the boss. Laurie had the overwhelming advantage in the board, and seemed to be bullying the boss, pushing him close to defeat. I am out of ideas on how to turn this around, could you go easier on me? Kekeki, as an educator, I can't go easy on you, right? This is just a game. Unlike the smiling Laurie, boss's face looked ready to crumble if he wasn't supporting it with his hand. He was unwilling to admit defeat, but also had a look of resignation, knocking the chess board with an extra chess piece. No, playing games is fine. I am just curious why grandfather is here. Hey, that's right, there was something I want to discuss with you and David. I wanted to call you to the dean's office, but I figured you all might be here. ERU didn't imagine that his grandfather's thinking was so haphazard and almost fell down. After ravaging the boss, pushing him and checking him on the chessboard, Laurie was finally satisfied and ready to speak. The boss, who was treated as a means to kill time, sighed, not bothered by this small matter. The things I wanted to discuss with the both of you is no other than the new models. David seemed troubled by it, too. It is regarding what to do with the new models in the future. ERU and the others took a seat, feeling surprised by this sudden topic. Frankly speaking, I was only expecting slight improvements. I was wondering what it took so long, and the results in the end were beyond my imagination. Because this is truly a new model machine. Maru's cheerful answer made Laurie's shoulders droop. I didn't expect you to create something out of nothing. To progress to this stage, are you planning to present it to His Majesty? Laurie's words didn't feel like a question, and seemed more like requesting confirmation. Because for him, the new model with the improved performance compared to the old models was more than enough to fulfill the king's request for the best machine. Reporting the new model to the king and receiving his well-deserved rewards was the natural progression of things. But things went contrary to his expectation as ERU shook his head firmly. Oh, I thought that's why you were working so hard for, is that wrong? Laurie's eyes widened from surprise, he then turned his head to glance at Telestal. I have something else to show His Majesty. I am thinking about something that would let His Majesty acknowledge that promise. Since His Majesty requested for the best, I have to give it my all, too. You are not giving it your all yet. Listening to Aru's firm statement, the boss, who was shocked, almost knocked the chair over and retorted. No one imagined Aru's series of action that defied common sense was just the beginning, which was outside of Laurie's and the boss's expectations. Yes, Telestyle is the foundation. After stabilizing the foundation, I want to construct a grand castle on top of it. That should give His Majesty the shock of his life. I think we will die from shock before that. And the boy only knows how to tell the truth, that's the scary part. Laurie changed from surprise and amazement to resignation. He wasn't the only one, everyone else felt the same way. Laurie took a deep breath to change his thoughts, grunting as he crossed his arms. Since ERU said so, this matter is settled. But anyway, since we completed the new model, we have the obligation to report it to the nation. That is natural. So in the end, we will still be reporting it to His Majesty. Laurie gave a negative response to Aru's query. His Majesty is also busy with work. He might have made a promise with you personally, but we can't settle this so casually. We will probably need to go through the proper channels. The proper channels, you mean the NTR Lab? National Technological Robotics Laboratory, and known to the public as NTR Lab. As its name implies, it was an organization that manages the development of silhouette night technology. From major projects such as development of new machines to minor details like improvement maintenance techniques, all things related to silhouette nights were handled by them and communicated to the rest of the nation. The Academy took part in technical enhancement before, so the boss with his background as a craftsman was familiar with this organization. That might be so, but there are problems with bringing the whole thing there. Grandpa Laurie, what's the problem? This thing is strong, right? If we start making a bunch of Telestyle, the knights would have it easier and the city would be peaceful. To improve to such an extent, the important people would be happy, too, right? CHID, who interrupted with questions, tilted his head in confusion. What he said wasn't wrong. Promoting strong silhouette knights was an effective way of guaranteeing the kingdom's security. While they were discussing this, a large demon beast larger than Jewel level was attacking the kingdom somewhere, and silhouette knights were suppressing them. Silhouette knights turning stronger meant shortening the time to defeat demon beasts, which would reduce the level of damage. For the kingdom of Fremavira, which was equivalent to the front line of the battle against demon beasts, this had priority over anything else. Why would reporting the construction of Telestyle to the authorities be anything to worry about? Laurie's smile had a hint of bitterness as he answered. It can be done, but making silhouette knights require a fixed process. It starts with accumulating small improvements, and a few engineers would use this as the foundation and apply them to the final product. Silhouette knights are strengthened by repeating this process. Constructing new silhouette knights were the responsibilities of the NTR Lab, and in terms of scale, only the NTR Lab was capable of doing that. Laurie remembered this part and continued. Developing new silhouette knights is a national-level project. I never imagined we could make an entire new model with the facilities on campus. Well, an idea that could revolutionize doesn't come along that easily. ERU and the boss looked towards the distance, as if they were avoiding Laurie's eyes. Both of them remembered doing crazy things in order to complete the machine they wanted. That's it. The problem is that the suggestions we submitted are usually minor, and there are no precedents for submitting an entire new model. If we suddenly show up with a new machine, we won't know how they would handle it. When Laurie saw Aru's smiling face, who was ready for battle, Laurie sighed softly. Grandpa, what's done is done, sighing over it is useless. Now is the time for us to grab hold of our happiness and take a step towards the future. Well said. Those who have the knowledge and don't apply it are not engineers. We will handle the things in the future when the time comes. You two are really confident about this. Seeing ERU and the boss squeezing out a smile with folded arms, Laurie felt he was a step away from reaching enlightenment. It might seem like a joke to outsiders, but they weren't taking it lightly. The boss changed his pose and started speaking. Also, applying new technology in practical use is the pride of craftsmen. We would get rewards which would fatten our wallets, too. The fastest way would be to pilot Telestyle to see the king, but regrettably, there is still one problem. The boss jokingly gestured with his hands and continued. The completion of Telestyle involved a lot of people. About half the students in the pilot faculty took part. The rewards for completing the new model must be significant, but wouldn't it be chaotic if we had to divide it with everyone who took part? The boss had a valid point. Providing new technology to NTR Lab would be compensated with monetary rewards, and that would naturally be divided among the ones who helped develop it. As the boss said, many people were involved in the construction of Telestyle. They included the proposer ERU, the craftsman doing the assembly and the test pilots. Even the alchemist who developed new materials. It was quite a number. But in reality, it's impossible to ascertain how much each individual contributed. Not just the way to report about Telestyle, just the mountain of problems was enough to make you give up. Can I say something? I have an idea. Raking the tense atmosphere, Edgar raised his hand slightly. Laurie, who was preparing to leave, ignored the two who were clapping to welcome the hero, going into Dean mode once again. Yes, no matter what opinion you have to tell. Pardon me. Leaving the way to handle the aftermath aside, Telestyle is not complete yet, but its performance is still better than the current model. By spreading knowledge of the prototype out, it would definitely benefit the national security greatly. Anyway, it would definitely be conveyed to the administration. Is that correct? Yes, that is true. Everyone present expressed their agreement. No one thought about making the new model exclusive to the Academy. After confirming this point, Edgar lowered his eyes to organize his thoughts. So, there is definitely a problem with the rewards, but we need to consider the matter of handing Telestyle over. No, I'm not talking about the way to do it, I just think the matter would not be over so easily. Anything wrong? Think about the situation when Ernesty first made the proposal, boss. We are used to it, but the technology behind the construction of Telestyle is unusual. After hearing this, everyone remembered this fact that was almost forgotten and quietened in enlightenment. If ERU didn't explain to them directly, they probably wouldn't believe in this technology. There was one thing they kept forgetting after seeing Telestyle's performance: it was still an abnormality in this world. The boss, who remembered this point, clapped his hands together and said, "Yeah, that's right." Everyone was wondering if the boy had gone insane. "So, you did doubt me?" After everyone understood that, Edgar continued. "In other words, it would be meaningless to just hand Telestyle over, right? They can see the exterior design and imitate it, but it would be hard to explain the interior design concepts." All of them looked at ERU. Under their pressure, even ERU was backing off a little. By the way, letting the people in NTR hear the whispers of the devil seems like a good idea. Is that how everyone looks at me? Like I said, we should fully utilize the devil, right? I will cry, okay. ERU looks cute when he is unhappy. ERU glared at the boss, but the boss remained unmoved, while AD seemed happy about something. Laurie ignored them and turned to Edgar. Edgar was looking upwards, seemingly thinking about how to express the idea he had already thought of in words. Laurie, who saw through that, hurried him. "I am not sure if this is the way to resolve this. I think there is a need for the craftsmen of the pilot faculty to explain to the NTR lab. In that case, asking them to hire all the members involved in developing the new model is a way, too, right?" Laurie couldn't help his eyes widening. Edgar's proposal was to use their employment as a substitute for the distribution of the reward money. Since the craftsmen would graduate from the academy eventually and join the workforce, this was a good career path, too. This method is a grand proposal. With their accomplishment of completing the new model and their knowledge of the current technology, they are the ideal talents for the future development of the new models. This proposal put Laurie in a dilemma. From the perspectives of teaching proper skills and the well-being of the students, this was definitely a win-win situation, but the academy would be the one that receives the most benefits. Which means NTR Lab would definitely negotiate with the academy, and that would be another highly difficult task. And it would be up to Laurie and a few other teachers. They were teachers after all, not professional negotiators, so it was easy to imagine how the road ahead would be. This proposal is very alluring, but I don't know if it would proceed so smoothly. We will do our best and give it a try, but it is still up to the decision of the NTR lab. Since the kingdom would be the one to decide, Laurie couldn't guarantee anything. It would be enough if they can decide their stance in general. Although he had a feeling that the negotiations ahead would be grueling, but as an educator, and with his pride in defending his students' efforts, Laurie smiled with a hint of bitterness. After finally finding a way to forge ahead, the group that was discussing was engrossed in conversation. But two of them, CHID and AD, had a troubled expression. They barely understood the contents and were finding it hard to keep up. Unlike ERU, whose mental age differed from his physical appearance, asking two actual 12-year-olds to join in the discussion was too demanding. Is there anything we can do to help? It sounds difficult. It can't be helped, we will just watch quietly. They spent a lot of time with ERU, who wasn't like a kid, so they had a lot of chance to take part in such talks, and they were always thinking about how they could help out. Simply put, because the boss and the others worked hard on Telestyle, they will continue to do so, right? 80 had a few terms she was concerned with: new, silhouette, night, construct, end. Her thoughts flew through her tunnel of memories with these vague terms and linked it to the things she was told a few months ago. She suddenly realized something and lifted her head anxiously. Quote, they said kingdom, so you have to ask a great person for that, right? We could use that promise, right? That is true, promise. That promise. The meaning in 80's words confused Chid for a moment, and he found the answer within his memories too. Ah. Right, this is Aru's merits too. That was the memories of their conversation with their father. Their father, Marquis Joaquin Cerati, asked this of the two of them: if he had any contribution, please inform me. In the heart of the twins, the existence of their father was equivalent to a way out of this stalemate. Nah, Grandpa Laurie. We have a suggestion. Oh, Chid. What is it? Laurie thought the twins would ask some questions at the most, and was surprised that they had suggestions. Chid didn't seem to be happy about that, and had the expression of a kid who had thought of a mischievous idea as he voiced out his proposal. It would be hard for Grandpa and the others to negotiate, right? How about getting an important person to be your partner? Oh, an important figure, do you have anyone in mind? Marquis Cerati. Chid's straightforward reply surprised ERU and Laurie, while the others felt confused. Some of them knew from previous incidents of the twins' history, but it wasn't widely known. Mentioning the name of such a powerful noble baffled them. Quote, exclamation mark. Yes, that's right, if it's Marquis Cerati, he was present back then too. It will be easier to explain it to him, and ask him to cut through the bureaucratic red tape. But will it be okay? What he wanted to ask was the situation of the twins' family. They are illegitimate children, and should be avoiding contact with the main family. Could we really ask your father? The twins understood what Laurie was conveying through his eye contact. Father told us before, if ERU did anything, he wants us to inform him. I see, so they agreed. So discussing this with the Marquis would be appropriate. I see, if the two of them are fine with it, I have no objections. What about everyone else? The others looked surprised, and looked at each other when they were asked. Speaking of Marquis Cerati, he was one of the few elite aristocratic clans. Marquis Cerati's territory was next to the Bocuse Sea of trees, so he would understand the importance of the Silhouette Knight's performance. Putting why the twins mentioned this name aside, if they could gain the Marquis' support, he would be a powerful ally. They looked at each other to confirm, and nodded firmly. We have no objections. Well then, sending the Telestyle over wouldn't do. How about briefing the Marquis with the documents? Yes, that's a good idea. Can I leave the preparation of the documents to David? Chid, 80, the rest will be in your hands. The twins stood up straight and accepted the task with a pat on their chest. Solving the problem made everyone at ease, and they laughed at the twins' liveliness. Telestyle, which was situated in the depths of the workshop, watched over this scene. After the sun set in the evening, the shops on the streets closed one after another. Conversely, now was the time for the bars to open for business. The citizens who finished their day of work came to relax and enjoy their meals, flooding the place in doves. A certain bar in La Hila Academy City welcomed the busy period as usual. Most of the patrons were elderly gentlemen, but there was a strange customer who took a seat in the corner. He appeared young, probably a teenager still at school. Since he was in the bar, he was an adult, 15 years old. He seemed very familiar with this place, blending in with the atmosphere and drinking beer by himself. As he was about to finish his first glass, someone sat down opposite him. For there to be an empty seat in this bar that was almost at full capacity, this meant the two of them had arranged to meet up. That man who appeared was burly and looked like a worker, ordered a beer right after sitting down, and smiled at the student. How rare for you to find me for a drink. How is it? Is it hard studying at the academy? The burly man took a swig after getting his beer and breathed out exaggeratedly. The student, who already drank a bit, replied excitedly. Ah, that's right, it's been hectic lately. Ha ha ha. That's how studying is. If you can overcome this part, you will become somebody. You are right, but it's been really bad recently. The two of them drank and chatted, complaining about their life happily. Their conversation became part of the noise in the bar. I thought I got over the hill, but I ran into a small problem. Ha, the life of a student is hard. Even if they conversed loudly, no one would bat an eye. That's the kind of place a bar was. Picking on the rumblings of drunkards would lead to nowhere. And if you look around the place, there were drunkards talking noisily everywhere. At this point, it didn't matter if another noisy fellow joined in the racket. These two who seemed to be part of the drunkards suddenly observed their surroundings. After confirming that no one was paying attention to them, they suppressed their voice. Right, really. That thing's completion is ready for the next phase. Oh, the students are quite capable. The whispers of the two wouldn't reach the ears of the other people because of the din in the bar. The student's face was red because of the alcohol, while the burly worker with a beer in hand looked just like a drunkard, but the things he said were calm and clear. You can't underestimate something like passion. Seems that this technology will be completed sooner or later. The details. You are not thinking about telling me verbally, right? The student shook his head, signaling that was impossible. He quietly took out a stack of papers. The cover was plain and undistinctive, but the content was information related to the new machine model. The burly man accepted it openly, putting it in his coat without a word. Like I said, we need to have a drink together sometime. You got that right. Okay, today I will treat the student who had worked hard to a few glasses. That's the spirit. The atmosphere from before was gone without a trace, and the two reverted back to simple patrons as they toasted their glasses. The bar got more rowdy as it got closer to midnight. No one paid them any heed or understood what they talked about under the table. Heavy rain fell onto the stone-paved roads covering the imperial capital Kankanen. The drizzle at dawn turned into a downpour, clouding over the entire city. The unexpected rain made the residents, who were always full of life, reluctant to leave their house. The streets seemed to have lost its energy. The boundary between the overcast sky and the stone pavement blurred together, becoming one in the monochromatic background. Marquis Joaquim Cerati was inside his mansion located in the aristocratic district, browsing through a document as he listened to the rain outside. On it was a sketch of an alien-shaped night that was the calm before a storm. It had an air of chaos that would threaten to swallow an entire city. His crude movement in pressing the bell on his table probably reflected the Marquis' mood. It was rare for him to lose his cool. The experienced butler who had served him over many years was composed as usual, and appeared in his office faster than normal. Master, your orders. Bring this document to Duke Dixgard's mansion as fast as you can. Make sure you hand it to the Duke in person. Yes, I will arrange for it immediately. Joachim handed the documents to the butler and spoke after the butler left. Duke Dixgard, this might be a bigger issue than we had imagined. His words were blocked behind the thick doors of his office, fading into the sounds of the downpour.